Wow, okay. Thank you so much for being here. You know, when we talk about partnering with World Design Capital, what does that even mean, right? So we're in a room filled with theater and film and all these folks, you know, dance, visual arts, all these folks. And some of us absolutely can understand what design thinking means, right? In theater, for example, you have sound design, you know, scene design, costume design. The design elements exist inside of those industries. But what we're trying to do is have you consider, what does design thinking mean inside of my own individual practice? Like, how can I be a design thinker as a visual artist, as a dancer? The first question is going to be to have you please just introduce yourself briefly. You know, tell us your role and tell us what has motivated the passion in the work that you do. So we'll just go through here. We'll start with Jim.
I've been an architect for 30 years, both as working with clients of a lot of different types and as a developer. But I think my career is sort of dissolving or evolving, I'm not sure which. I'm teaching full-time at San Diego State. That's recent, this year. And we have a really interesting opportunity to create San Diego's only public accredited school of architecture there. We're going to give that a go, and that will be a game changer for our region. You can imagine, like, all over Southern California and Northern Mexico, people are going to want to come to that school. So very excited about that possibility. I also have been working over at Bread and Salt for the last 13 years, slowly building a community art center there. We have 45,000 square feet of space, and we have 6 different galleries at the moment. And I'm excited that I think the final phase of that project is a live-work housing project for artists. I think we have enough room to put about 40 of those units on that land behind Bread and Salt. So these projects take a super long time. It won't be done for like 4 years, but we're starting the design work on that. And then a project I've been working on for also a long time, since 2008, is maintaining access to an important meeting place on the border called Friendship Park. When Border Patrol built the second wall back in 2008, 2009, they completely cut off this meeting place where people would go and speak to their families and friends if they didn't have the ability to cross borders. So we've been working ever since then, just trying to barely keep it open, and we've failed. We've completely failed. It's closed. In the meantime, I'm working on a more visionary plan for an 80-acre truly binational park on that site. It would be 40 acres in Playas and 40 acres at Borderfield State Park. That's a passion project that I'm convinced will be built in our lifetime.
And what has driven the passion in the work that you do?
I think just experimentation for me. I just want to be trying new things, and it's not that I'm sitting around wondering what I should do. I'm going to invent something, but it goes back to, I think, what you talk about, design thinking. You know, I tell my students, for instance, at school, if you have like a project, if you're going to do a remodel for a client, like the most basic project you could ever do, and the client comes into your office and they hand you a big, thick, like sheaf of papers or pictures of what they want in their house, photographs of stuff they pulled out of magazines. I tell my students that's really not what they want. They don't want that. That's stuff that they admire, but your job is to, as you go through the process with them, to gradually introduce them to accept something that is in none of those pictures. They haven't seen it before. So I think design thinking is process-based, very much. Process-based, and as you go along, it affects the beginning. It affects the basic functional needs of how the project started at the core.
Thank you. Jonathan. Jonathan is a board member of the World Design Capital and also the executive director of the Commission for Arts and Culture.
Good morning, everybody. So I have had the good fortune of being the director for arts and culture for the city of San Diego for almost 4 years. 4 years in November. So what that really means on a practical basis, we are most known as being the largest annual arts funder in the region. But really what it means on a daily basis is my job is to be inside City Hall pushing arts, culture, and creativity in the work of every department. We have a couple of very exciting initiatives. Actually, before I say that, I want to say, I'll say those first two things. So there's a couple of really important initiatives that we are working on. We will be announcing our citywide cultural planning process probably in November. We're close to hiring consultants. This will be the first time that the city actually conducts comprehensive cultural planning. It's incredibly important that I'm going to say that again, it's incredibly important that everybody in this room participates, because this is going to be the first time that the community actually says to City Hall how you perceive arts, culture, and creativity, how you want us to respond. So we'll be creating a policy framework for arts, culture, and creativity that will be applied to all of the other planning documents inside City Hall. So Parks Master Planning, street planning, etc. At the end of the day, what we want to see happen is we're imagining a city where artists are actually at the table for making decisions around environmental justice, social justice, community engagement. A lot of the stuff you guys already do, but the city has never put the systems in place to actually formally have your voice at the table. We've done a very, very, very good job of supporting the nonprofit side of arts, culture, and creativity. That's not going to go away. Now we need to really invest in artists and creatives and culture bearers. At the end of the day, you guys are why my office exists and why the nonprofit structure exists. I also want to say, not to divert the attention here, but housing is incredibly expensive in this town. So every day we are really very intentional in messaging that inside City Hall, that when we're talking about affordable, accessible housing, you guys are part of the discussion. We don't want to see anybody moving to Austin or Denver or Los Angeles or Berlin. We want you guys to have a place here. We want you to know that you are an important part of the economy. Much more importantly, you are an important part of the fabric of the community, and we're going to make sure that you can stay here.
Thank you. And what has driven the passion in the work that you do?
It's city building. I love cities first and foremost. I've always wanted to work inside city government. But at the end of the day, we all know, great cities always have arts, culture, and creativity at the core of them. And so I found this little niche where I can advance that work inside the bigger infrastructure of city government.
Really important work. Thank you. Okay, and I'm so happy to introduce Chris Sanchez. He is the co-owner with Karen, right over here of the Soap Factory, but you also have a very, very interesting background. So please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us what has driven the passion in the work that you do.
Greetings to everyone. And a little bit about my background and what I do now. I am the president of the diplomatic body for human rights and working with indigenous communities in Tecate, Baja California. So I go back and forth and do some projects over there and come over here. For the last years, since 2015, my wife and I have been doing different farmers markets and other events, selling our products, which now we have a base product and we have a base home out of the soap factory, and this is where we make our products. And the concept that we're trying to implement since 2015 was the garden to shower. Garden to shower. So what does that mean? What that means is to create a relationship with different gardeners or farmers around the community and source our ingredients that we use for our products and try to make the best of our product, for anybody to have access to. A lot better than conventional when you look into ingredients. So now, since a year ago, we got presented with this opportunity, and it feels nice that our home base is here in San Diego, with you lovely people. So putting, building networks and creating something that's sustainable, for all. I started doing gardens and designing yards, for other people. I noticed that whenever we use our platform with our products, I would put posts about the garden that we had. We used to have a ranch in the Imperial Valley, 4-acre ranch. So we had a big garden, with goats and all that stuff. I decided to educate myself and become knowledgeable in the areas of sustainability. With that, later on it developed into design, because I understood that in order for the idea to become attractive, to grow and become contagious, you need to make it appealing to the eye. So people that are new to the idea of growing their own food, it needed to be attractive. And so I started, experimenting, with furniture, vintage, antique furniture, and implementing it into the gardens, lighting, a little bit about the layout, native plants to grow, and implement that into what I do. So with our business of Early Grow, it just developed into, growing food and into design. So now, we're trying to wrap it up. We're wrapping it up into one thing, which is in the holistic umbrella, because it all starts at home and it's within, and taking the responsibility of your own health, and it starts with the food that we consume.
Tell us what has driven the passion in the work that you do.
What has driven it is that, for me, from my experience, I've dealt with Bell's palsy, facial paralysis 5 times. So I had to take matters into my own hands and, why is this happening? So when you start researching ingredients, and the food that we eat, you understand that it's essential. So in order for us to take our power back, it needs to start at home. And I didn't know many people that would grow their own food. And where I'm from, the farmers markets don't exist. That's the Imperial Valley. So decided, to educate myself, read some books, go to seminars, watch videos, trial and error, growing different stuff. And it's been a journey. It's been a journey. So that's been my driven.
Thank you. It's beautiful. And very good longtime friend, Allison Andrews, founder of Fashion Week San Diego, but also an incredible entrepreneur, businesswoman, and business leader. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Knowledge is power, so this is wonderful. I'm just happier than a clam right now just to be here in the presence of everybody and everyone who's spoken so far. I'm like, I want to work with you. I want to work with you. I'll be down with you. Let's do this. I'm already motivated, and I haven't even given my intro here, but a little bit about me. As Susanna said, I'm the founder of Fashion Week San Diego, and that was quite an undertaking when I started that in 2007. And from there, and prior to that, I've been a consultant. I had APA Business Consulting here in San Diego for almost 20 years, which is wild. I started it when I was actually 19, if you can believe it. So I have some great stories of coming up as a young woman who couldn't even get in bars and trying to run a business and sell to men. So I have some really fun stories for later. But I rebranded APA Consulting to be Cantor Creative Group in the last couple of years. I felt it needed a new fresh coat of paint, and I still consult. I ended up selling Fashion Week San Diego, but I'm still very heavily involved. It's my first child, my baby, so I'm the #1 cheerleader. There's not a Fashion Week San Diego event that doesn't happen that I'm not on the sidelines cheering on my team, my fashion family, and in that corner, so to speak. And then during the pandemic, speaking about sustainability and what you eat and growing what you eat and taking your health and your home very serious. I started a chicken coop cleaning business. And the reason why is I have my own chickens. I have my own garden. I'm really into this stuff, big time. Big time. And when I was pregnant, I couldn't find someone to service my chicken coop. And I'm in the crazy chicken coop lady organizations. I know all of them, we know each other, and we all have the same issue when we travel and went out of town. We all can find pet sitters for our doggies, our kitties, our bunnies, but chickens are a little specific, so I saw a hole in the industry. So I ended up creating a chicken coop cleaning business that's fully automated. It's the funnest little business I've ever started. It's a joke, and I laugh all the time that, I'm making money off of shit, I can't say it any other way. Clean money, dirty hands, and there is nothing wrong with it. And talk about the swing of the pendulum from high fashion to, literally, poop. It's amazing, chicken shit. Yeah, you can't say it the other way. I have to say the bad word. I'm sorry for those that don't like cursing, but it just seems to be appropriate when you talk about that business. But I've had quite an extensive career. I've been very, very fortunate to work with IMG when they produced New York Fashion Week and Los Angeles Fashion Week. I produced Los Angeles Fashion Week before they pulled out of the California region. That's why I started Fashion Week San Diego. And I even worked with Naeem Kong and Women's Wear Daily on a case study specifically on the region of San Diego, talking about the impact of fashion and specifically using migrant labor, border labor, being a border town, and how that really affects fashion when it comes to manufacturing, sewing, etc., textiles, dyeing, fabrication. And it was pretty intense and pretty incredible what we found out as far as statistics go, as far as the fashion industry here in San Diego, that many people don't realize or maybe don't have access to that knowledge to understand how viable it is as a border city. So I love whenever I can lift the veil behind the industry, so to speak, here in our little town, our little big town, and share that we do have quite a thriving fashion industry. So that's a little bit about my background.
What has driven the passion in the work that you've done?
So I actually wrote that because I can get really long-winded when I talk about my passions, obviously. But the first thing was when I originally started working in the fashion industry, the art industry, the visual arts, creative arts, design, it was 100% because my God-given talents are for sales, marketing, and business. My God-given talents were a beautiful complement to those who are creative. So I naturally fell into my job and started my consulting business because a lot of my friends were the creative artists. They were the creators. But I always got frustrated being the cheerleader that I am innately, that they weren't getting the credit or getting paid what they deserve. And it really pissed me off to my core. I'm kind of a hardcore hype girl, so to speak. So I became basically like a salesperson, and it grew from there. And I found that I had a really great knack for taking what creatives do, packaging it, educating, and telling the consumer why they should value it, why it should be something that they're investing in, and what impact it could have on the local economy or the global economy, depending on the good and the industry and the service provided. So that's how I grew my business. It was number one because I couldn't do what creatives do, and I found a way to take my God-given talents and put them in an industry and with people I wanted to play with and make money with, to be honest. The second thing, The second thing was, again, I'm really passionate about beauty and creativity, as I think one of my fellow panelists said, that, and I'll paraphrase and use my own words, but I believe the backbone of any community is creative arts. That is the backbone. Infrastructure, all that other stuff is part of it, the foundation. But the backbone, what makes it come to life, what makes it sing, what makes it desirable, is the creatives. Let's be honest, that's what you see on Instagram. You're not seeing the skylines and those guys laying that roof right now. Very important for housing, but we're not Instagramming that. We're Instagramming the bomb, carpet wall here, and the cool lights, and the fact that we're in this old, brick building that has great barnyard doors. That's the creative side. That's the heart. That's the backbone. That's the stuff that makes it sing, makes the community whole. And I'm all about whole health. And so that's my number 2. And my number 3 is really simple. I'm all about the underdog and empowerment. And I believe in what I've seen and experienced in my own life. And money talks, and money has power. So if I can arm the people that I want the voice to be heard with that, that's where I'm going to go after it. So again, I know that you can have influence if you can get to a certain level in your career of influence, right? Then you can have actual impact. So if I can help those people that I want to have a larger voice with that, that's going to be what I do. So those are my 3 reasons.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to start our questions with Jonathon because I want to set us up in the conversation of World Design Capital, right? So I'd love for you to give us just a brief overview of what is World Design Capital, right? Like, what are the goals of World Design Capital, rather? That's really the question. What are the goals of World Design Capital, and why were we selected?
Great, thank you. Sorry, allergies. Could you raise your hand? Who is familiar with the basics of World Design Capital? Wow, fewer people than I thought. That's not good. Okay, so I have to say, firstly, I'm speaking, but this guy has been involved in World Design, getting us to World Design Capital from the get-go. So, Jim, correct me if I make any mistakes. So, World Design Capital is a biennial event. It's an initiative of the World Design Organization that's based in Montreal. I won't go into a lot of the history, but the World Design Capital program has been around for probably 15 years now. What they are interested in, when I say they, it's World Design Organization, is interested in that large second-tier city that is aspirational and is shifting into another phase of global prominence through creative industries. So, for example, right now, World Design Capital is in Valencia, Spain. It's been in Cape Town. It has been in Helsinki. It's been in Mexico City. I think that was a misstep, frankly, because Mexico City is obviously global and, prominent in creative industries already. But nonetheless, they are really interested in those cities that are moving itself into another level of global prominence. The interest in bidding for World Design Capital started way back in 2016. It came out of the design community through the organization of Design Forward Alliance. And it has evolved over the years, what the real goal was for the bid. So a couple comments on the bid. The bid is San Diego, Tijuana, so it is the binational region. It is the 2 cities together, Tijuana and San Diego, and with Tijuana and San Diego comes the region. So it's basically San Diego County and Baja, with the 2 cities leading the initiative. World Design Organization is very interested in a legacy effect on cities. And when I say cities, I mean the government structure, but also the systems and the creative ecosystem around City Hall. So I'll give you a couple examples. In Cape Town, a few legacy initiatives in that city are the creation of a Department of Design, with the Chief Design Officer leading it. Many of you know the City of Los Angeles has a Chief Design Officer. Many European cities have Chief Design Officers. American cities are really behind in this space. So World Design Organization is really pushing the agenda with city infrastructures or city governments to really embrace the industries of arts, culture, and creativity, to understand and to leverage them as economic power, as important places for workforce development, and then all of the soft stuff that we understand that goes along with creative industries. Our bid was shortlisted against the city of Moscow, and we won. We all know that Moscow is an amazing city, huge legacy of design and architecture. It also, if you're not aware, Moscow, contemporary Moscow, has an amazing fashion scene, has a big film industry. They're doing amazing things in that city. Their bid was really based in traditional design sectors, fashion, film, architecture, and they were looking at the history, certainly graphic design, they were looking at the history, but also they were emphasizing what's happening today. Our bid was very, very, very different. Firstly, it was the first bid that has ever come from a binational region. Secondly, and the first American city, thank you. Well, I don't think it was the first American city to bid. First American city to win. In fact, I know that there was a really large city in the Great Lakes that didn't win a few years ago called Chicago. So yes, this is the first the first U.S. city to get the designation. But our bid was very community focused. The bid was about harnessing the power of design in addressing community issues. So the border and how we traverse and manage the physical border. But also, we all know we are dealing with one of the worst housing shortages in the United States. Every global city is dealing with environmental justice issues. So very practical, pragmatic issues that we're dealing with in our region that we share with Tijuana was really the approach. How can our region work together, centering design and centering designers in finding solutions here at home that can be replicated in other cities across the world. So that was the bid.
I want you to get into what we talked about, which is policy design,
Sure.
right? Because when we think about design, right, what do most people think about? Fashion design, right? And architectural design, right? When you think design, but what really fascinated me is a recent talk with Jonathon was the concept that policy design is a thing, right? And talk to us more about that. Like, what makes this a winning? What will be success here? Yes, the events are important, but what will be a success at the end of the day? At the end of 2024, when we're done with this, we wash our hands, amazing events, all the things. What really matters here?
Yeah, I love that question. So I'm going to speak really internally about City Hall. So imagine a policy framework that is adopted in 2025. Could very much come out of our cultural planning process. Probably will be an additional policy framework that is just about design. So imagine if there was embedded in our review processes for development. There's also checks and balances around physical design of our infrastructure. Right now, a street in the city of San Diego has some very broad guidelines of what it can and should look like and function, and it's very frankly bureaucratic. But there is no design standards, or there are minimal design standards. So imagine if there was really concise, specific guidelines that said that functional objects have to be in our streetscape. That's a practical thing. But also imagine if the community was involved in the processes of discussing all of the internal workings of City Hall, all that stuff that most of us, including me, don't really see, that truly does impact our lives here. If we take the walls down at City Hall and we flip it so that the community is actually driving the discussion. That is an ambition that many of us who work at City Hall would like to see happen. But because of limitations around the way systems work right now, it just doesn't happen. So there's the intent among a lot of the professional staff and the elected officials, but our systems aren't 2021 or 2022. They're 40 years old. Imagine if we flipped it and you guys were driving the conversation on the decisions that are made around policies. That's really what we want to have. That's what we want the legacy to be at City Hall. Yes, we want designers to be in more of a leadership role in a practical way so that every object that we are creating, there's actually a designer or an artist or a culture bearer at the table. But we want the community to be driving the way that City Hall functions.
Thank you. I want to get into architectural design, fashion design, the artful garden designs that we're talking about. I'd love for whoever wants to speak on some, like an example of something that you've seen that was just really notable, really moving for you, that has stood out, you know, that has really kind of re-energized you in, I'm doing the right work, I'm in the right industry, I'm doing the thing I should be doing because it matters. Whoever wants to speak.
I'll take it. A good example that I can think of is whenever I built a front yard garden. Not in the backyard, not in the side, a front yard garden. That right there is an instant community building. You know, if you didn't talk to your neighbor, when the neighbor starts seeing the development, the way the garden is growing, the beauty in it, it creates it's a very nice icebreaker. It's a very good opportunity for the neighbor to meet the other neighbor, somebody that passes by every day with a dog, you know, that usually nowadays is very seldomly, you know, you get a hello, goodbye. But that right there, having a front yard garden, it literally builds community and it's a very nice icebreaker. So I always encourage, you know, whenever I get called out for a garden, to try to make it in the front yard, but make it look appealing and inviting. And I've seen how it really creates community. Just that detail alone. And it's contagious. Next thing you know, the front yard, instead of having a lawn, you know, you can have a garden that actually gives back to you, doesn't just take away. You know, so that's a good example that I can think of.
I love that, Chris. It's you know, gets me thinking also that, you know, the community food gardens, right, where you can share each other's crops. But also, one thing that kind of interests me is how you can plant plants that are culturally significant to you, right? Or
Absolutely.
herbs that are, you know, medicinal herbs and plants and things that have a cultural significance to you. Particularly, I'm thinking about the neighborhood that we're in, right? Like the Sempasuchi, you know, Day of the Dead flower, for example, which has, you know, cultural significance to us, and hibiscus, and, you know, things like that we could grow in our own yards, and also it has a spiritual connection to the work that you're doing, or to your life, to your personal life. I don't know if you want to say something.
Absolutely. Sempasuchi, the flower of the Aztecs, or Nahuatl. It's a beautiful flower. Here it's known as the myrtle. And I love working with that flower because it's a very nice pollinator. It attracts the bees. You know, it's food for the bees. It's amazing. Plus, it's very eye appealing, right? And I feel like it knocks home. You know, it's made up of Mexico. So I love working with that flower, and it's so happens that it has a connection to Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, and it is believed that it attracts the souls of our loved ones. You know, so it's a very cultural flower, nice little detail to have, which is very beneficial and eye appealing, you know, to the environment.
So you can walk by it and think of your ancestors.
Correct. Yeah.
Jim, Allison?
I'm gonna piggyback real quick off that because I'm just thinking about the neighborhood I live in is very culturally diverse, and some of my neighbors are growing plants that I have never seen, and I'm not afraid to say it, or fruits I've never tried. And it is definitely a conversation starter, especially the Asian varietals of fruits and that I've never experienced that aren't mainstream, not the dragon fruits. I'm talking way funkier stuff that I don't even know the name of it right now. But I love it, you know, and it's a great conversational starter. You know, how do you use that? What do you cook with that? What's it taste like? It's a whole conversation and experience that can happen literally in your front yard, like you're saying. So I really do love that, and I have experienced that, so I can echo that. But for myself, I think the one thing that has been really reigniting my passion is it's full circle for me currently. When I started, retail was everything. There was not e-commerce yet. People did not have to have a website. People did not have to have an email. That did not make you business professional or not. That was not a thing yet. Now, rewind that, right? Can you imagine going right now and not having any of those things? We wouldn't be able to function. But I mean, that was not a thing when I came up in my career. It was still very heavily brick and mortar, retail establishments. People coming in to shop based on what you did in your window display and merchandising and the brands that your store carried that they couldn't find other places, that they saw somebody else wearing, that they actually asked that person, where did you get that? Not like, let me go on Amazon and see if I can buy it, or Etsy right now, you know? So what is really reinvigorating my passion for the industry, because it's back to where I started and kind of my playground, so to speak, is retail. And I love the fact that retail right now is really artisan retail. So it's somebody that does one thing really well and not trying to be a catch-all. So for example, a hat maker, going back to old millinery, you know, like a milliner making a hat, a cobbler, someone that's making shoes. I mean, that's really cool. And that's a talent, and that's an art in itself. And the fact that they're able to take the risk and open a retail store, which historically right now is not so great, and it's always been a risk, but it's a really big risk. But going back to that is really exciting for me, and because what it tells me is that the consumer, which is the important cog in this wheel, right, of this ecosystem, is looking for that and wants to invest in that and appreciates and understands the quality of work that's going into whatever that good is. So that makes me happy, because what that tells me too, there's a secondary effect, is people are fed up maybe with fast fashion, and they're pursuing and looking for those individuals in their own city that are taking the risk, opening that small little retail shop for you to go in and get a custom hat or a custom pair of, you know, sandals, or, you know, upcycled shirt. There's this guy, Stanley Clothing in Encinitas, and he's taking linens and old rugs like this, and vintagey, weird textiles that you wouldn't see in apparel, and making the coolest mint shirts. I mean, awesome stuff coming from this guy, you know? And I love that. So right now that's very exciting to me to see it kind of do a full circle. Fast fashion is still heavily used. I mean, come on, Zara's not going anywhere, Target's not going anywhere, and I'm not going to knock them. I got them in my closet, so I can't say too much, you know. I'm guilty too. I got kids, I'm guilty, you know. That's where we go. But, you know, at the end of the day, I love the fact that the consumer is putting their money back into where I would like to see our industry go back to. That makes my heart full and happy.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little something about examples you've seen that really inspired you to kind of remind you that you're doing the right thing and you're in the right place.
I'd like to start out by saying I was really inspired by Jonathon telling us about how the city of San Diego is seeking community input from kind of a bottom-up approach. That's a really amazing thing the city's making a commitment to. It's going to be fantastic to follow what happens. And really, the city of San Diego, when I think of the start of my architectural career 30 years ago, they were more of a foe. You know, they were someone you fought against because they were so antiquated then. You couldn't get anything done. They were not progressive in the least. And things have really turned full circle. I want to give some affordable housing examples. Probably 20 years ago now, or 15 years ago, the state started stepping in to all the different cities in California, because no cities were providing affordable housing. They were not getting any traction. So it was the state that just told all the cities that you will provide more density, and if you get more density, you will provide affordable housing. And the developers got some really interesting incentives right off the bat. They didn't have to provide parking, for example, for their projects, which I will never provide a single parking space in any of my projects. And it's not just to save money, and it's not to make everyone's life a living hell. It's not to do that. It's because I prefer my projects to look to the future, like 40 or 50 years into the future. My buildings are going to last 80 years, I hope, fingers crossed. And I want to build spaces that provide outdoor meeting places for people and not parking spaces for cars. I believe our parking issues are going to be solved naturally. Robotic cars, shared cars, you name it. In fact, we're going to start having to figure out what to do with our spaces in between the buildings. It's not going to be like thoroughfares you see now. Interstate 5 is not going to look like that anymore. It's conceivable that we could basically remove Interstate 5 as it goes through downtown San Diego. Remove it completely. Imagine the parks, additional housing, additional city that you can make when you do such big moves like that. That's going to happen. That's going to happen in our lifetime. The great things that the city has done, but we're not seeing the benefit. We're not seeing it yet, right? You're seeing homelessness everywhere, but the rules are already in place. Like the Granny Flat initiative, that is going to be a gigantic generator of affordable housing. It's going to take 30 years. That's how long these things take, but it's going to happen. And the city recently finally coming to the conclusion that they're not going to let every Tom, Dick, and Harry rent out their granny flats for Airbnb. Brilliant move. It has to happen because that has to be housing stock that people can rent. I really applaud what the city has done there. I'm really happy about that. There's another law that the state came up with that probably not anyone knows about, so maybe a few of you do, but our single-family neighborhoods are not going to look like they do now. There's a new law that says you can take any single-family lot anywhere in the state of California and subdivide it by right. No long application process, no nothing. It's going to make a lot of people very unhappy, but we have a crisis. We have a huge crisis that needs to be solved. So all of these things are building and building and building, and they're going to be coming. I don't always think like the problem is sort of solved. It's just going to take 30 years. It's like a slow-growing fruit tree. We're not going to see the fruit for 30 years. We've had a vacancy rate under 5% for 30 years, my entire career. There's been a shortage of housing for 30 years. That's why we're in this problem. But these problems are being addressed in large part due to local, municipal government and state leadership. So I'm super optimistic.
I mean, that's an interesting take. I don't think that most people are seeing it that way, but so we're playing a long game. That's what's happening. So we're right at time, but I do want to give an opportunity for any questions that we have out here. And also I want to remind all of you that at 10:30, at 11 o'clock, the music starts. We're going to have all sorts of wonderful activities happening. 12 o'clock is the actual mashup. So there's a bunch of things that are happening there that are encouraging creative collaboration across different industries. Stay for that if you can make it. And every single person in this room should take something from that and help contribute to the structure and help be a part of our documentary about what the creative community wants to see for the future of their sector. So definitely please touch that in some way, even if you just draw a flower on it or put a sticker on it, but do something to that structure to help us capture that. Does anybody have any questions? Yes? Maria.
Well, I have more comments on. I live in Playa de Tijuana, and I'm a historic preservationist, studied PhD in Cornell in historic preservation, and I have been doing transborder historic preservation. So that's something I came here for. It's a creative industry, and if you think about design, start with the missions. And I'm so happy you mentioned that it's not just Tijuana, San Diego, those are the leaders. Because yesterday I was, for instance, with a group from Valle de Guadalupe who are so worried about how development is destroying the rural area. And I work for the government in Baja California, for the Secretary of Culture. And I am on the board of the San Diego Model Redwood Museum, supporting the Chicano Art Museum that will come here, and also save our heritage for California all my life. So I do a lot of things in Tijuana, in San Diego. It's always for this kind of region. If I look at the Californian style, Southern California, we go from here, goes all the way back and goes to Mexico City. So all that impact. So I just want to introduce myself to let you know that's why I'm here. Because I really need to make this connection. How do I find the people in World Design 2024? We have to be there, and many people have promised to do this too.
Follow up with all of us. If you guys want to get more involved with World Design Capital, with the City of San Diego, I'm very happy to make these introductions to everyone on the panel. So just make sure that you check in with the person that you checked in with today. Follow up with us. I want every single person in this room to get involved. Absolutely. Yes.
I just want to thank all of you, and thank you for hosting this. Thank you for letting us be here. This is inspiring and like confirmation in a lot of ways. I'm from San Diego, born and raised, and a lot of my earliest memories start in St. Vincent de Paul, homeless shelter. And I'm a creative. My grandma was the first woman doing bronze sculptures in San Diego, like back in the day. And I just started getting back into art last year, so this is like big confirmation. I just got approval from SDG&E to paint boxes in Spring Valley because we're lacking in art drastically. And just everything you guys saying is confirmation. I appreciate you, and I just want to let you guys know that. The gardening, that tip, community garden. If you don't have a yard, community garden outside of your apartment, a community garden on the side of the road, because in Spring Valley we've been building a community garden outside of the local middle school. And in like 6 months time, well, not even a couple months time, we have wildflowers, we have sunflowers, we have basil and tomatoes and peppers. And the neighbors in that community there, they've been able to like meet each other. One of the neighbors there, he always tells me Ricardo, he said like, oh, I went and got some rosemary, and it's just beautiful. It's a great way to connect with people and build more love and pride for your city. And then like you were saying about marigolds, not only for food guys, not only for like herbal, medicinal, but you can dye clothes with marigolds, and it's beautiful. So just all of it tied together. Thank you guys.
Tied it all together here.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's like it's amazing. It's amazing. You guys give me chills. I'm like crying and home here.
Thank you for saying all that. I'm so happy to hear that. Yay. Time for one last question or comment, and then you're welcome to follow up with any of us during the break. Anybody else? If not, we're going to say goodbye to our wonderful speakers. All right, please give a big round of applause for our speakers, Allison, Sanchez, Jonathon, and Brown. Stick around and be a part of it. Hi, my name is Susana Paredes Swap with Vanguard Culture. The workshop that you're about to see is called Build the City, and we're asking creatives to share what is the most inspiring creative city that you can imagine. What does it have to have?
Nice air, pure, natural, like you can actually breathe into the city. Hi, my name is Jill. So I'm actually in mixed media. I'm a fragrance creator. I create perfume and colognes.
Hi, my name's Sean Waters. I'm a local performing artist, recording artist based out of San Diego. I set up a little cardboard cigar box house to have local houses more joined together, more interconnected in community.
Hey, I'm Sarah, and I am a visual artist, and I'm a director of a nonprofit, so I'm an arts administrator as well. This is an architectural piece that goes with some kind of a space called the Nest, where it's meant to help facilitate people who are shy or introverted but want to collaborate.
My name is Jane Hare, and I'm a filmmaker and video producer and director. So I guess from the standpoint of what's important to me in building a city, it's one that embraces the arts, especially the moving arts like film and video.
Hello, my name is Heaven Majesta. I was born and raised here in San Diego, California. So my passion behind the functional landfill is to create opportunities for people to learn more about sustainability and to practice sustainability as well. So maybe there will be some sort of like facility that borders the landfill, or a park where creatives can come and they can actually go into the landfill, source their supplies, and then go and create.
Hey, I'm Jaya Arthur Meisel, and I am the founder of the Planet Love Parade. I own the Love Parade. So I built these giant dolphins, sharks, manta rays, sunfish out of recycled trash from the ocean. It's a place where the arts thrive, not just survive, but where art drives political action, culture, the beauty, the design of the city, the eco-friendliness of it, the mass transit of it. Let's live in a place where we're happy and fulfilled, and there's gardens everywhere, and it's bee friendly, and we get our pollinators activated.
Hi, my name is Christy Stone. I'm the founder and chief muse of Be Creative Zone. We save stuff from the landfill for funky art projects, upcycling and repurposing. So today is a really fun day of getting artists together to put their dreams into this community from wasted material.
My name is Kirsten Obo, and I've been an artist in the region for 45 years, more or less. I made a performance space, a musical performance space, because music unites communities. There are a bunch of studio spaces in the little thing I built.
My name is Christopher Pretty. I actually run 2 laser tag facilities, one in Mission Viejo and one in West Covina. Out there I was building a fun little project, just something fun. I was trying to do a steampunk laser tag.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm a graphic designer. I do freelance. So my little thing that I made was, it kind of felt like a diorama. I had like a little cigar box, and then I put like a sheet of music in there, and then there's 2 heads. And I found this little quote in a magazine that said, like, I think this saved my life.
My name is Adrian Ahern, and I play with a steel drum band called Dylan's Steel Band. My contribution to our city would be music, and I'm starting to do yoga because I find it's really helpful for my mind and my body and my spirit. That's my contribution to the town. I want to do that.
So my contribution to our little city, our creative city, is a resource recovery parks. And there's 4 of them located throughout our little town because every community needs to learn how to sort things.
For me, the most inspiring creative city has to have great public transportation, green spaces, and areas for creatives to convene and collaborate.
which is what is happening here in Logan Heights, bringing the art community together under one roof where you can have a conversation with anyone that comes here and be on the same page.
I'm Toni Robin. We're going to introduce ourselves, and then we're all each going to talk a little bit about what we do, maybe some tricks of the trade, etc. But really want to engage most of our session in creative questions from you. And one of our rules is there are dumb questions, and we want the questions and the dialogue to be at a higher level. So don't ask us for the email address of the arts editor. Don't do that. So what we're going to do is let me say, one of my pet peeves is when people say, "Can I just buy you a coffee and pick your brain about a show I want to promote?" And I say, well, no, actually, that's what I do for a living, so you can hire me. But today, you get to pick our brains. So thanks to Susanna and the Vanguard Culture, you have time to get experts' opinions on media relations, PR, and promotions around what you do. So just a quick, how many of you are an artist or an art maker who has to do their own promotion? Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's why we're here. I have to say that ideally you'd have someone who is doing your PR and publicity, but we understand that that's not often the viable option. And I work with a lot of art makers who they're not trained in what I'm trained in. So we're here to help. So quick intro, and then we'll go down the line. So again, Toni Robin. My company name is TRPR. So I have been doing arts marketing for my entire life, except it's not what I studied. I studied to be a sports journalist. I have a journalism degree. I thought I was going to be on broadcast TV and do a lot of sideline stuff. And I got my first job out of college in PR and have been doing promotion, marketing, publicity for arts and culture the whole time. I got to San Diego in 1997. and started working for the Performing Arts League with Susan Clausen, and did the marketing and PR for the Arts Tix booth, half-price tickets, day of the show. Then I worked opening Arts District at Liberty Station and creating that Arts District for arts and culture and creatives. And in about 2007, I opened my own business. So I do music, dance, theater, visual art, and I'm an old school publicist. I just completed the publicity for the grand reopening of the Mingay Museum in Balboa Park. And yes, beautiful if you haven't been there, and MCSD in La Jolla. So both those were hugely successful, and I'll talk a little bit about those as we go forward. So that is me.
I'm Susan Clausen, and my organization is Clausen Communications, and I'm also a publicist. And my education was originally in theater. I got a theater degree, performance. And then one of my first major jobs in San Diego was at the Performing Arts League, working with Toni. And from there I went to Lamb's Players, where I did a lot of marketing and PR and sales, etc. for them, on and off for 17 years. And so about 6 years ago, a lot of different organizations in the city were coming to me asking if I could outsource just the PR line item of what I was doing at Lamb's Players and just handle publicity for them. I wish I couldn't because it was a conflict at the time. And then when they downsized at Lamb's Players, I was like, there's 5 organizations that have expressed a need for this in the past year to me. And so that was about 6 years ago. And since then, I've been handling PR for theater companies, dance companies, for the San Diego International Film Festival. So I do a lot of film promotion as well, and some social service I've done, and I love it. They all sort of tie together in lots of interesting ways.
Hi, buenas tardes. I'm Alejandra Enciso Dardashti. I am the founder of Enciso Consulting. It's a PR marketing firm, binational, Tijuana, San Diego. I have a communications degree from the Universidad Autónoma de California, yay Tijuana. And I started out in the children's hospital in Tijuana, helping them translate grants back and forth from San Diego to Tijuana to get all the funding. That was my jam, like consulting, doing, and then I went to TV. I was in TV Azteca for a while in marketing, ratings, programming, all that stuff. And then I went hardcore into journalism. I was a binational reporter too, covering the performing arts in both in English and Espanol. And then it happens that it's easy when you know everybody and you see the need of coverage and PR. I started doing PR for cultural organizations and also bringing artists from San Diego to Tijuana to see the work and vice versa. And then Enciso Consulting started, and it all started also doing a internship with Broadway San Diego because I went back to school because I didn't know what to do. So I went back to, after marketing, doing marketing, I did it in Tijuana, regionally for Ensenada, Tijuana, Mexicali, and then I went to Mexico City and did it nationally. So I decided to come back home to Tijuana, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I already worked on a national scale, I already did this, like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, north. So I came up to San Diego, I went back to school, and I did an internship with Broadway San Diego, and when they saw that I did all this financial stuff, they're like, let's do this, but on your own. So I was like, okay. So that's how Enciso Consulting started, and I worked with Broadway San Diego Opera, Moxie Theater, Tijuana Hace Teatro, Lux Boreal, which is an international dance troupe, the works. Okay, and I work with both these women, and it's just a joy to be on the panel with them. So I'm going to talk a little bit, 5-7 minutes and down the line. So I do a talk for students, and I call it's more than a press release. And basically, it's a half of a day about you can't just send out a press release and expect coverage. A lot of artists and art makers think, well, you need to cover my show. Well, these editors, as you know, are getting hundreds of requests for coverage, and so it's up to you to help them see why they should cover what you're doing versus what the person sitting next to you is doing, because there's only so much ink space. So a couple of things that I encourage people to think about if they are deciding to write the press release.
basically the first one is, does it have everything that the reporter needs? These people are very, very busy. So is there any question that they would have that you can already answer in the press release? And obviously who, what, where, when, but really dig in and have someone else read it and see if they have any follow-up questions. Because the easiest thing for them to do is take the press release and run with it. So really looking at it and seeing, is it fully complete? Is it accurate? Does it have links to the things that it needs? Just your basic, press release 101. But the thing that you need to think about is who is going to read your article? Who is going to be the end user when the press release gets picked up? And to think about what you want this person, and I use this all the time, to think, feel, or do. I have it tacked up onto my computer. Think, feel, do. What do you want that person who reads your article? You want them to buy a ticket? You want them to tell a friend? You want them to contribute, make a donation? And the think, feel, do will help you write your headline. So a catchy headline, first of all, takes the onus off of the reporter, but it really gets their attention. So you're in sales, right? So it can't be just Toni Robin Productions is putting on a show, headline. It has to really catch their attention and tie into what's going on for them. So here you have an editor or reporter whose job it is to find interesting stories, and your job is to hand them to them on a silver platter. That's basically it. So a lot of times you have to think about, what are the external factors that I could tie into? I do this a lot. I just did, as I said, the opening of Mingay and MCSD. I tied into the fact that San Diego has a lot of new venues. The Shell is a new venue. La Jolla Music Society has a new venue. Those aren't my clients, but I pitched it that way to get this sort of, critical mass of a story, and that is how we got the New York Times. Because they weren't as interested in, some museum on the coast is opening with a new architect. There's 4, there's 5, there's 6. What's happening in San Diego? Why is this happening there? It became a bigger story. Or you can look at the calendar and think, well, what's happening in the world? What's happening in society? Oh, it's Mother's Day. Do I have a mother in my company? Am I a mother? Is my daughter also in this company with me? Thinking about holiday, whatever is happening, how is your show? How can you get onto the bandwagon and leverage what's happening in the external with what you're trying to do? To be honest, everyone was looking for BIPOC stories. I asked all my clients, I understand that this person may not be the star of the show, but this is what the media is looking for. So you have to find the stories that they're looking for and then give it to them. The other thing that I tell people is they ask me, well, what's the most important thing? And I say, if I only had $100 to spend, I would spend it on a good photograph. I think that the visual is so important, and sometimes you'll see, if you look at the calendar listings, there's a bunch of calendar listings, hundreds and hundreds, but there's one photo. And that photo is not always the best show and the most interesting show, it's the best photo. So if you could think about, who do I have on my roster of people on my board or my neighbor that is a really good photographer? And I would make that a priority and make sure that when you send your press release, that photo is front and center. Because that will get you above, as we say, above the fold in the old school. I think that Susan's going to talk a little bit about making sure you reach the right person. But I always, I think that think like a journalist is the best advice that I could give somebody. Understanding what their needs are, what their deadlines are, what they're looking for. Making sure that your spokespeople are available. This not only helps you get your story in the paper or in the magazine or on TV, but it helps you get your next story and your next story. Because reporters know that I'm going to deliver. I'm going to deliver a spokesperson who knows what they're saying. I'm going to deliver really good photos. So they take my emails because I have established myself as a quality person with integrity and a good story to tell. So if you start to build those relationships, thank the reporters, post their stories, link to them, then next time you reach out, they're like, oh yeah, Susan, she was great. She made it super easy for me. Let me see what she's doing because this other person was a pain in the neck. So I think that, thinking like a journalist is a key to doing a good job. I think one of the things that you should also be thinking about is, what kind of coverage do you want? Be specific. I want a preview. I want a review. I want you to meet and talk to our dancer or our artist. I think this story, be very specific about what you're asking for. Because they appreciate that. Because a lot of times they'll say, I don't do previews, but Jane does over here, who sits next to me if you're looking for a preview. So I think that being explicit and specific about what kind of coverage you want is also going to help the reporter. Try and make their job. I talk about silver platter PR. I try and hand it to them on a silver platter. And that's basically my mindset 100% of the time. So I think I will just turn it over. I could do this all day. But let's hear what the ladies have to say, and then we'll dial into your questions and maybe specific strategies that you want to have us review. I'd rather honestly take that time. So with that.
Excellent. Is this one working now? We good? That was great. Thank you. And I'll adjust what I was going to talk about a little bit. I'll cover some other things because I agree with everything you said, and that's how I operate as well. I think I'll focus a little bit on the relationships with press and with people, and this might come off as Pollyanna, but whatever. I've always sort of had the perspective always that I don't interact with people based on their job description, right? So if someone's the president of the company or someone's the secretary of the company, I'm interacting with them exactly the same, with respect, and that makes it easier for me as a publicist to know that it doesn't matter if I'm talking to the reporter or the person organizing the story or the head of a company or celebrities. I'm often dealing with celebrities, and that can be intimidating in some ways. But if you sort of level the playing field in your mind to say whoever you're going to be reaching out to is a person, just like you're a person, and you want to connect with them as a person. And that, for me, is not like a tactic for PR. That's just how I operate as a person. So I think it makes it an easy fit for PR, But I think lean into that. If you feel that way about people, lean into that in your interactions with the press as well. They're people too, and they care about stories. And I like to focus on the story of things as well, that you really want to find what interests a specific person. And different platforms are interested in different topics. And if you do your research, you'll realize which ones are interested in what, and which writers are interested in what, which newscasters are interested in what. And just, if you want to be connected to certain outlets, I would pick your top 5. Like, where are you reading or listening or watching that you say, I wish I was there? And then just focus on those 5. If you don't have a publicist, do your research on those locations and say, all right, and get your foot in the door with whichever organization. Find a story that was written about something similar to what you do and research that writer. You can reach out to them. I loved your story about such and such. I mean, connecting with people as people is really important to me. And you had asked me some about, let's see. So for me with the storytelling, it's about the people, about the story, and then about who cares. Because sometimes you're pitching to someone that doesn't care about what you're talking about. And I always say this to my writers is, I don't want you writing about something you don't care about, because that shows, right? Like when you're writing about something and you don't really care, like there's not as much engagement there. So one of the things when I'm pitching stories, especially when I have a lot, I'll use the San Diego International Film Festival as an example, because they're a good model for that. They have, hundreds of films coming in for the film festival, celebrities coming in, social justice stories, medical stories, documentaries, and large gala films. So there's this real huge range of different kinds of storytelling. And different writers care about different things. So when I'm talking to them, I'll specifically say, I don't want you writing about something you don't want to write about. Here's some ideas I have, things that are engaging to me. Tell me what is engaging to you, and I will always ask. Like, I can't always guarantee I'm going to get you the coverage or to talk to the person you want, but I will always ask. And you asked for some stories with us. I have one funny story that one time I reached out to somebody at a publication, and he was a film writer, and he was very, not interested. He was telling me all the things he didn't like about film, and I was like, okay, well, how about documentaries? Most of the film people I know loved it. He's like, I don't like documentaries. I was like, okay. And I told him who the celebrity honorees were. He wasn't interested in that. And I said, all right. I said, well, I'll be honest. I don't want you covering it if you don't like it. Tell me what interests you. Look at the slate. You're a film guy. Look at the slate. Tell me what jumps out at you. It's like, all right, I'll get back to you in a couple weeks. I said, okay. He called me 2 hours later and he said, Burt Reynolds was going to be in a film. It was his last film before he passed, and it was going to be in the festival. And he said, get me an interview with Burt Reynolds, and I'll put you on the cover. And I was like, okay, you know, but we did. Long story short, we did, and it was this whole like back and forth between people to people to people, and a hurricane, and couldn't reach him, but it happened. But that was because he asked for. I told him, you can ask for whatever you want, and I will try for whatever you want. And he did, and that meant he was writing about something he was super passionate about. It means we got a lot of print for this organization, but finding who those people are for whatever it is that you do. And also finding ways to connect the community. You sort of touched on this, like, that's what my motto is under Clausen Communications, is connecting the community, because I do feel like you know, stories cross borders of organizations a lot, right? And so if you have a story that or art you're doing, but it's connected to other, you know, to restaurants or to nonprofit organizations in some way, pitch that whole story, because that connects everything. The example I had for that, another film festival one, that they have a Focus on Impact program, which is tours into the school system. So they bring documentaries on social impact topics, and they bring them to the schools, they tell the kids about them, they watch them, and then they discuss them. It's a very impactful program. Well, we had one about homelessness, and so we were going to get coverage for that. Kimberly Hunt was going to come in and cover it, and she said, I love the film, I want to interview the filmmaker and the person going along, excellent, excellent. And then she reached out and she said, is there someone in the community who was experiencing homelessness that I could interview to sort of add a local angle to this? Which at first made me sort of like, ugh, because I'm also trying to be very careful about not taking a situation someone's been in that's been uncomfortable and making that like that snazz part of it. I didn't want that. I said, but let me think on that. And I reached out to another client, completely different client, a social service organization. I said, who do you know that has experienced homelessness that this would be beneficial for them? Like that telling this story would be helpful in some way. And he said, well, there's the principal of such and such in school. He's the principal now, but there was a time when he was living on the streets downtown San Diego, and I said, oh my goodness, that's the school we're going to. So suddenly this story about a filmmaker and the film he made on homelessness in our country was being brought to a school led by a man who experienced homelessness years back, and it suddenly became a much more relevant to our community, right? And I think everybody has the potential for that with their stories, be it if it's about art, who are you serving, who are the kids that you're serving, because then you can pitch your stories to education writers, right? And how, so there's, and I think always looking for the way, for me, I always want it to be a beneficial situation for everybody, right? And that's just sort of how my mind works. And I think looking at what you have to offer in that way, and including others, only serves everybody. It really does.
That's a good point in expanding the universe of what story you're telling and looking around at your neighbors and your colleagues and community and finding out, is there someone else that is also doing something similar that broadens this perspective, that makes it a bigger story than here's my exhibit or here's my show. And if you don't have someone, maybe find someone. If your art is of a certain area, I'm sure you could like brainstorm looking at area nonprofits and think, well, maybe I know that Art of Elan is doing a bunch of music tied to the environment, so they're looking for environmental groups. Well, that's going to be a bigger story. I know the New Children's Museum has an exhibit by an artist named Michelle Montjoy, and it's all about sensory friendly for kids who are maybe, on spectrum. And so now they're partnering with other nonprofits. All of a sudden it's a bigger story where I'm trying to pitch this artist. Here's an artist, and she's doing this beautiful work, and isn't it great, and do a big story. Well, no, it's bigger because it's a bigger issue with, problems with in the environment being too noisy for some kids, and so it becomes a bigger story.
It also becomes more personal, and again, like I'm always hesitant in how I talk about it, because I never want it, and it isn't for me. I never want it to be like, how can we hook in with this, heart bleeding, but I don't like that. I really want to see who cares about this, right? And one of my clients is Joey Travolta's Inclusion Films, and that's a filmmaking program for students on the autism spectrum. And so it's a similar situation where when I've pitched it, we've connected to other organizations that also serve that same group of people in the community. And as you're pitching, like at news stations, he'd be on, and people would be coming downstairs from, oh, well, my son, oh, well, my daughter, how can we? And people aren't just their job title, and that's always been very important to me in every situation. It's especially important when you're telling a story. Like, everybody's touched by the things you have to talk about in different ways, and finding those people. And it doesn't have to be the head of an organization or the most important person. That's really not what it should be about.
And it could be about you. Find out what's specifically interesting about you. You know, I get a lot of artists and choreographers who give me their bio. Well, I can't pitch that. I'm not going to get you a job. But what is your background? Why are you in the arts? And sometimes those stories, I could find those one-on-one personal profile opportunities for a creative person if they tell me a little bit more about how they became the person that they are. So so Alejandra comes from an interesting side, not only the cross-border media relations, but she toggles between being a reporter herself and being a publicist. So it's kind of interesting. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and your work with the border media.
We're pitching her sometimes.
Yeah. And don't send like one full page like bios. It's too long, you know, we don't have the bandwidth to do that, especially when you have like a cast of whatever, 5+, right? Yes. That's weird. No, it's fine. And I wanted to piggyback a little bit, because I do both, and sometimes like, oh my God, you know, you're not serious when you're doing both, you can't do both. You can, and I am serious about it, and I'm kind of good at it too, so I need to like toot my own horns here. But I want to say also that I feel like there's a vice sometimes when people in the arts or want to get a story out there. They're like, oh, the UT, you know, that's the first one, or oh, you know, in TV, NBC or KUSI. I think that also when we're in the other side of things, uplift your grassroots publications. You know, you have Vanguard Arts Culture that has a team of writers that go and see stuff and review. You know, check. Now there's Instagram profiles, Facebook pages that write, that just do a short post about what they saw, where they went, that kind of thing, like what they were saying, like in the community. Check if there's like local, a school, someone that's doing that's, you know, focused on that demo, depending on the coverage that you want. And regarding the cross-cultural, well, it's a jungle out there. Sometimes I was telling Susan before we got here that sometimes I would pitch myself as a reporter and say, hey, I want to write a story on your play that you're doing. And they're like, I don't think it's for you. The publicist would say to me, I don't think it's for your media outlet. No one speaks Spanish in my cast. I have no, you know, Latin American people there. I don't think it would be of interest to your readers, you know. And I would be like, well, that's for me to say, not for you, you know. So I want to write a story about it, and I would get a lot of pushback on that, and kind of like racist, you know, comments about it. And it's just push, and don't think that there's no one that's going to be interested in. You put it out there, and there is going to be interest. And now again, with Facebook, Twitter, you send out a link. People share that link, and then more eyes get on that story. I'm talking more on the audience aspect of it. For example, there is an onstage playhouse in Chula Vista. The artistic director works at Crest Cafe, also in Hillcrest. Crest Cafe is turning 40 in Hillcrest, and they've helped out the community. They helped with the Hillcrest sign. A lot of people don't know that, and because there's a relationship through the arts with Onstage, and he has a tie with Crest Cafe, then there's coverage for Crest Cafe because of him. So also foster those relationships. Don't call either your media rep, your publicist, or the artist and say, hey, I have this. Can you pay attention to this? No. Figure out when their birthday is, you know, if they're a mom, hey, happy Mother's Day, you know, send out a little post, a little this. Social media makes it way easier now, and you foster those relationships, and you keep that alive, not just when you have like a play or a show coming up, you know?
One of the most basic things that takes our time is keeping our media lists current. Is, you know, it's difficult if you're doing your own PR, but you know, just start that Excel spreadsheet, and if you see an article, again, grab the name, get the email. It's so basic, but you know, sending to editor@ is not going to get you what you want. I personalize. You know, hey Sarah, I saw, as Susan said, I saw that great article the other day, here's something else. I think, you know, getting those media lists updated, and even if you have an intern or a student that could start collecting those names and emails for you, that's money, that is golden. People ask me for my email list and my media list, I'm like, you gotta be kidding. I spend so much time, and again, I've been doing this for 30 years, so I have targeted lists for every subject that I'm doing, but just having that really robust and current media list, and they change all the time, especially with TV and radio, assignment editors change all the time, but an email to a person versus editor at gives you a leg up instantly. So it's worth the time if you could, again, find an intern or a volunteer or a board member who wants to do a little research and spend a couple hours. Those emails are out there. So that's just a basic, you know, administrative tip that it's super important to have a real name. So let's see what you got on your minds and questions about how a strategy or something that you've worked on, or you want to know what we would do. Fire away. Every website, every media outlet has a website with their contact info. And so even if they have editor at, I write a note. Hi, I'm Toni Robin, and I'd love to know who at your paper is interested in my new store. Could you give me the name of your features editor or the name of your arts editor? And then I've started a communication, and they're like, hey, I know who you are. Whatever. I think you have to have no fear in reaching. I'll reach out to anybody.
Don't care. Yeah, you don't need to care.
And so there's always one email somewhere for a publication, and just write them and say, hey, who covers retail? Who covers arts and culture? And then you put that name in your database.
And I wanted to add something to that no fear thing is, you know, I used to, I think when I was not doing solely PR, when I was doing a number of different things, I would think of if they covered us on the news, they were doing us this favor, right? Like, oh, they're covering us, you know, thank you, which I am thankful for it. However, I think a helpful way to think about it as an individual is you're also doing them a favor in that they have a whole bunch of space they need to fill up in a publication, a whole bunch of airtime they have to fill up, right? So you're not doing them a favor if you send them a link to your website, right? But you are doing them a favor if you are the person who delivers, like we do, you know, delivers here's photos, here's a link to B-roll, so you have B-roll of the inside of my store, here's, you know, information, here's, I even, when I write to the television stations, I write the intros, suggested intros for your anchor.
Silver platter.
Right, they don't have to use it, but they have it. I've given it to them, so they have a place to start. So what you're doing is their job for them, right? And that's what a publicist does, but that's what you guys can do too. So it becomes more about if you are known to follow up with the stuff they need, right? Because they're going like this fast at a lot of organizations. And if you can just, you know, I know it's emotional for you, and that's okay. And it's not for them, right? So you just want to be the person who says, this is important to me, this is why, and here's everything you need, you know?
And I'll also add to that emotion that you're feeling right now, feel into it and write about it.
Yes.
Write about it. And that can be an intro, like she said, it can be like a little slogan or something a hook that can get people interested. And also another tip to find out, most reporters and people that are public now have like their Twitter handle, you know, their Facebook. So DM them, you know, like seriously, no fear, like she said, and go and do it. And that's also, if on their Facebook page, you write a direct message, and sometimes you get farther that way too.
I think lean into who you are too, because I mean appropriately. But I can have a wicked sense of humor. I'm from East Coast, and so it's a very different sense of humor. But when you find those people who you can connect with in that way, then it becomes more than a pitch too. It's fun. Like I have certain writers in the city that it's so much fun to write back and forth with them because we know each other well enough by now that you know who you can play with and who you lean into who you are as a person. appropriately. You know what I mean? Great. Other ideas, questions, concerns? Sure.
Yeah. How do you go about trying to pitch something that you've been passionate about for many, many, many years, yet you feel like nobody's really interested?
There's always somebody going to be interested. Always.
And I think also, yeah, for one, switch your mentality. Like, if say you're right, say nobody's interested, then this conversation doesn't have to take place, right? So there must be somebody interested, right? You know what I mean? Or you wouldn't be, there would be no need to try anymore. But I would say that you want to be concise in how you share that information, because it's your everything, whatever it is, it's your everything. You have to give them enough to intrigue them, but not to overload them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it could be there's another entry point to your story. If you've been telling this story about this project that you're passionate about, and you're getting a roadblock, you know, there's a message there, so you're taking the wrong approach. Or maybe people aren't interested, I don't know. But you might just try a different entry point in, and a different angle for your pitch that's maybe, you know, just something fresh and different. And I don't know what the topic is, but if something's not working, there is a message there. And so you really have to listen. Well, the other thing that someone said earlier is if you see someone who writes an article that might be sort of adjacent to what you're trying to talk about, that would be a person to start with, because they're somehow similarly interested. But sometimes, you know, there's failure. I go to clients all the time. I said, I cannot guarantee coverage, period. And I always start with that. I ask them, what are their goals? What are you looking for? Let me know. Like, if you want the New York Times, I need to know. If you're just happy with the UT, that's good to know. I need to set expectations, but I cannot guarantee anything. Because PR, it's, you know, we've all pitched stories and all of a sudden there's a tsunami or there's 9/11 and you lose your moment. It happens all the time. So PR is not a science. It's relationship building, it's storytelling, it's creative thinking, it's collaborative, but there are no guarantees. 1 + 1 does not always equal 2 in our world.
You know, I remember sitting down with a writer right when I started doing this on my own, and I knew I would be representing a number of different arts organizations at the same time. And I was an arts writer, and I said, can you handle me being the person who messages on behalf of all of these different organizations? Do you see that as a conflict? And I said, because I don't see it as a conflict, I'm gonna pitch them all equally. And he said, no, I don't see it as a conflict. He said, as long as you know I'm not always gonna say yes. I said, of course you're not gonna say yes. Your job is to say no to me, you know, 80% of the time, whatever, but not taking that personally. That's another thing. You can't be like, oh, they don't cover me, or even show that to writers, because a lot of people do. When they get rejected, it's a personal affront, right? And that then writers never want to write about. You know what I mean? You want to just provide them what you can. If you get a no, you know, find a different way.
I think on that note around emotional attachments and ego, sometimes a writer will write something that you don't like. Okay? You got to live with that. You know what? That's public information. That's his opinion or her opinion. And you're going to have to just sort of take that. And as an artist and a creative person, I know that that's very hard for people to get a bad review. And I think, you know, as I said, take it like a man, which is a terrible thing to say now, but you just have to take it and thank that reporter and be happy for the visibility, because that's one person's opinion. But it becomes, especially with artists, it becomes very, very personal. And I think it's sometimes an effort to just sort of rise above it and just keep doing what you do and be happy that your name was in the paper.
I also, I have a saying, especially when I'm dealing with the reporters and features editors in Tijuana. I have a saying with my clients in Espanol that's like, competir con el ratón, which means compete with the mouse, meaning Disneyland. Disneyland, when they launch a new thing a year, like 8 times a year, okay? So they invite the news, the reporters, the radios, all media, influencers, everybody and their mother to stay at Disneyland for like 2-3 days, all expenses paid so they can work. even if you don't have signal to go live, they'll provide you the signal, okay? So you can't compete with that, right? If you are like a smaller either publication or artist or show or whatever. So I just lean into that in the more general aspect, and I look at what people are covering within the Disneyland stories. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can take from that, that's the human aspect, that's just, he wants to go to the park for free, okay, I got it, you know. And I start learning what they do and what they like, and then I adapt that to my stories. It helps.
I think another thing that I talk to with students is practice your pitch. Get a friend who you promise that they should push back. So make sure they know that they're not going to go, oh, that's a great story. And pitch them your story. And if it's someone who is a good friend, they'll push back and say, well, you know, why would I care about that? Why would my readers care? And practice your pitch before you call. I'm OG publicist, I call people. So, and I do work it out first about what I'm going to say because my elevator pitch is important. But if you practice it, and within, you know, that 90 seconds you can really tell them why this is relevant, it'll be an impact, and even if in a quick email. But I think practicing that and having a friend or a colleague that you can run it by is going to be helpful.
And in a timely manner, I think, too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that call and it's like, it's tomorrow, and you're like,
oh yeah,
I want to help you, but
knowing their deadlines, if you call a monthly magazine in September for an October event, they're annoyed. So again, knowing your outlet, knowing your media, knowing your list. I pitch monthlies 3 months in advance. I'm pitching now for holiday gift guides. So knowing who you're pitching is respectful, and they appreciate that. What else? I know you guys got questions, or you get to pick our brains. Anybody else? Do you guys have something you hadn't talk about?
Can you give us success stories and like do's and don'ts? What should you not do?
All right, what should you not do?
Well, what I said, don't do it, you know, with a short time period. Try to include really your pictures, your links, quotes. Send a couple of quotes. You know, if you're talking about a show, the director's quote, the producer's quote, an audience quote, like send a quote, make it easier. And I get like with you, like from your heart, and those quotes really make a difference. Sometimes you'll have the writer call you and say, hey, can you elaborate on that quote? Like the quote is what they'll get them. I don't know on what not to do. It's not.
You must have some don'ts.
Don'ts. I think I've said it, but I really don't treat people differently based on what you think they can do for you. You know, and I think that's a life one anyways, but I think when people know that you're going to provide them things and be respectful to them and listen to them regardless of whether they're in the decision-making position or not, then it makes them more comfortable with you, the whole organization, the whole, you know, more comfortable. When you walk in the door of a television station, when you're on first name basis with the person at the front desk, you know, because you've had that same rapport with them that you've had with the producer. You know, they are equally a part of your community. And that, again, that might sound a little, but I truly do believe that makes storytelling easier and more accessible when everybody is just talking to each other as people, you know, and
I have. Do not forget to caption those photos. Please do not send out just the JPEG and it's like DCM 2.0. Like, don't do that. Say who it is, who the photographer is. The credit is like also super important. I've had photographers reach out when I don't have the credit and I don't have the time to dig for the credit, and I say courtesy of the organization, right? And I've had photographers reach out to me and say, hey, that's mine. I'm like, oh, well, I'll add it, you know, that caption.
If we're going to get into do's and don'ts, I'm just going to give you a very basic do that seems simple, but it's effective, and I'll tell you why. Post your event on all the calendar listings. And the reason I say that is because the writers and editors look at those listings for ideas. So if KPBS is looking for a feature, they're looking at their own calendar. The UT is looking at their own calendar. The reader, they're all looking at their own calendars for ideas to bubble up to the top, to put that photo. So there are probably 15 or 20 online calendars of events happening around town. So if you have a show, an exhibition, a performance, you need to take the time and copy paste on all of these calendars. And it's basic awareness for anyone who's looking for something to do, even if you don't have a story, but it is a resource for writers to pick on what story, because they're going to look at their own stuff first. So I have an assistant that does that because I don't have the time to do it, but it is tedious, and it's completely worth it, all the way to the Tourism Authority has a calendar, the radio and TV stations have calendars, so it gets your show out there in a critical mass way, but again, a resource for the writers.
And also when you use those, if you're just sort of starting off with your promotional efforts, then you have a link, a direct link to something that you can share on your social media platforms. So if you populate a website, you know, like KPBS's arts listings, right, then you can link directly to that with the photo you've provided. So you can share that on other social media platforms, and it you know, it looks like it's coming from someone other than you, which it kind of is. You know?
And they all compile. You've seen the top 5 things to do this week. All these e-newsletters that come out from these media platforms are pulling from the calendars, because they really don't have time to read all these press releases. So I think that's sort of an easy win for you to get a nice, broad swath of visibility.
And it also works on your Google, on the algorithm. If you do a search and say, you know, soap factory or whatever, and you put this event on the calendar, it goes on the Google search on the top 10. So
you can pick
that's good.
Even pick 5. Like if you had to pick 5, do the Union Tribune. I have to pay for some of them now, but Union Tribune, The Reader, KPBS, Spingo, and maybe NBC. Yeah, is a nice one. So like even if you only do 5, you know, do them.
The other idea for people who have to do their own PR is join up with someone else who doesn't have a publicist, or 3 of you who don't have a publicist, and hire someone to do the calendar listings for all of you. So that way you're just all paying one person, a student who needs some work, who you give the content, here's the image, here's the link, and please go post on all these calendars. So students are looking for work. If a PR student or journalism student or art student, and the bunch of you got together and hired that person, they've got work and you've got visibility. So
I hire my daughter to do it. I have a daughter.
Pool resources, yeah. Anybody else? One last question? Yeah. Closing thoughts is keep at it. You know, I've been trying to fight for arts coverage in this community since 1996 and 7, and we are still fighting for arts coverage, and it's a constant battle, and especially with some outlets closing. City Beat used to be a great outlet for us, and so you have to be creative and you have to find these places that are looking for your stories. It is a never-ending fight, so keep fighting and keep making great art.
And I'd say remember their people too. Remember the people you're pitching are people, just like you. They love things just like you do. It's not this like vast unknown that you're pitching to. Yeah. You Rich?
Yeah. How much would it cost for us to hire a publicist, someone like yourself? What would we look at if I'm saving my ducats? Because I don't have the experience or the expertise you have. But we have a great product and we have a great service. What would I look at? I'm busy creating art, and for us to spend the time that you're talking about to relearn how to do this, what would it cost to hire someone?
Well, I love and hate the question. So I love that you realize that you kind of have to hire an expert, because we do what we do, and you don't have the time or the knowledge, the expertise to do it. So that's great. Am I willing to talk about my fee? Probably not. I have different models, and then I have a per project model. You have a particular show, and you want me to work on that show. I usually meet with you and kind of hear what resources are available. Am I writing the press release, or is it already written? Do you have pictures? How much do I need to do? How much time do I have to do it? And then I'll get back to you with a price. Other clients of mine are on a monthly retainer, so they just pay me and I just do whatever it is that they need me to do, anytime, any place. So it does range. Also, I'll finish with saying that it also ranges with the level of expertise and experience. Someone like me, you know, I'm really good at what I do. I've been doing it a very long time. I'm probably on the high end. I'm not as high as an agency. So we are sole practitioners. So you're going to find that we're more affordable. We're also willing to work with nonprofit budgets. So when I talk to clients, I'm like, yeah, you can hire an agency and you'll get the third junior publicist and it's going to cost you more, or you'll get me. So if you hired someone who was just starting out, who was also good, it might be more affordable. So again, not to speak numbers, but those are sort of the concepts that I work with. How about you guys?
That's exactly how I operate, the same way. And it is different. You're going in to do different things for different organizations because some already have certain things handled and some don't. And so I would say the same thing. And if you do have a lower budget, maybe finding a more junior person who is a sole entity. You know, somebody who's just starting off but is eager to learn all about it and learn it on your behalf.
I just want to add, sometimes people call and say, could you send out this press release? That's all I need you to do is send out this press release, it's already written. And I say, it's more about the follow-up and all the emails that come back that I have to answer. It's not just, I'm going to push a button so it should be, you know, $100. I mean, it's the years of experience building my list. It's the, how do I follow up and get them to really grab on? So a lot of times, can you just send out this press release for me? Is almost as annoying as, can I have coffee and pick your brain? So again, I never give a quote without meeting with the client first and really finding out what they have and what they need. You guys agree?
Yeah, there's also agencies, some of them, and solo PRs too that do pro bono, so that can also be an option. Yeah, exactly, if you could do pro bono. I do the same as these ladies. I also do bundles. Sometimes if you can't do a retainer, if you can't do a per project, okay, how many projects do you have in the next 6 months or whatever? Oh, 4, okay, then let's do this price for the 4 and I'll give you 10% discount. Yeah, I like bundles.
Yeah, bundling is good. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find the extra money. But again, I always say, like, if a tree falls in the forest, if you have a show or an exhibition, nobody comes, isn't it worth it to spend the extra, I don't know what, to be able to get people there? I get butts in seats. That's what I do. We do people in the door. We are audience development. So it's one thing to do great art, but if nobody's coming, could you add the extra? Could you find a funder? Could you find a friendly board member to come up with whatever it costs to just get professional PR? It's going to be, in the end, the cost effective when you weigh it out versus having nobody come. You know, it generates ticket sales, it generates art sales, it generates what you need in the end. You just have to sort of bite the bullet and find that money at the beginning.
I've had board members do that for nonprofits before, where they recognize that coverage is what's needed, and they'll say, that's what I want to give to. I want you to hire a publicist for 3 months for this project. And so if you have a vested board that recognizes the import of that for your organization, sometimes that can help too.
Yeah, and also, yeah, if you have a 501c3, a nonprofit, those coverage pieces are used for grants. So that's also like that chain.
I would maybe make sure that you hire a good writer if you're doing a website so that the content is PR focused. A lot of people write their own web copy, and it's, you know, I get a lot of MFA people writing their web copy and nobody understands what they're talking about, but I'm just offering copywriters are as valuable as gold. All right, I think we did it. Did we do it, Susanna? Are we done? All right.
So this session, I'm really excited about it, and it actually started, you know, I run a nonprofit, as you know, Vanguard Culture, and, you know, I've been doing this for 10 years. The first few years of my life, I was in this situation where I had baby in arms, and I was like, I still want to stay creative, I want to stay connected to the community, so I started this organization, and not really having an intention of, oh, someday it'll be this thing. I just wanted to get creatives in the same room at the same time, talking to each other, sharing resources, collaborating, and then promoting our creative industries, which I'm so passionate about. And but I didn't start the organization with a business mind, really. I wasn't thinking like, this is how I'm gonna make money, and this is how we're gonna be sustainable, and this is how I'm gonna make my salary, right? So when I think about my legacy and my history and my ancestors, I think about like my grandmother who cleaned hotel rooms, and I think about my mom who didn't have a high school education, immigrant mother, and somehow she figured out how to run a daycare for 20 years and bought herself a home and somehow figured out this American system in order to give us a home and, make a living. So she's not someone that I could lean on when we're talking about like financial planning or someday retiring or, things like that. But I can definitely lean on her for, resourcefulness and grit and hard work, hustle. Like she works hard. She's, the hardest worker I know. And so, here I am and I have all those things. So now that the organization is 10 years old this year, I thought to myself, I don't really have, mentors that look like me that I can lean on for like, okay, what's next? What's next? How do I take this to another level where I can pay myself a salary, where I can have employees, where the thing is sustainable? Like, what's next for that? So that's where this came from. And I look to people that I admire, that are respected in the community, that I knew have lived their own personal experiences that are similar in some ways to mine, where they kind of had to figure this out. And so what we want to have a conversation about today is, and you may be BIPOC, you may not, but I appreciate that you're here in this room because you're listening and you're learning how to apply, how to apply diversity, equity, inclusion into your world and be open-minded and understand people who are different than you. So anyway, I'm so honored to introduce this panel. I actually would prefer that they do a self-introduction because they're all their bios are gigantic. So do a self-introduction, please, and briefly just tell us what has driven the passion in the work that you do. We'll start with Felicia over here.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Felicia Shaw. I'm wearing two hats today. I'm the executive director of the Women's Museum of California, which is located not too far from here in Southeast San Diego at the Joe and Vi Jacobs Center. And I also am wearing the hat as the board chair and incoming interim executive director of the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition, which is an advocacy organization that has been around for almost over 30 years. It brings all of us in the creative sector together so that we can speak with one voice when we're advocating for increased funding or any type of change that would make our work more impactful. I've had a long career in arts and culture, and my journey has been enriched by incredible people, progress that I've seen along the way as a person of color. I spent quite a bit of time in philanthropy, on the philanthropy side of giving money away, and now I've come full circle to being involved with an organization that actually needs money every now and then. So I'm intrigued by that prompt about, what has inspired you, or what's the prompt exactly?
What has driven the passion?
What has driven the passion? Okay, so every day when I get up and I swing my legs over the side of the bed, I am motivated and inspired to keep going because of the evidence that I see that the arts makes change in people's lives. The arts are a powerful tool for social justice and community change, and I see evidence in that every day. Whether it's a mural on the side of a wall in a neighborhood where, you've seen a lot of gang activity and now you don't. Or if you see arts happening in schools where kids who learn differently now have an opportunity to learn math or English because they can see the world through a creative eye. Whether it's my 91-year-old mother she's leaning into dementia, but when you play certain music, she comes to life. Someone coming out of the military with PTSD that needs a place to put their anger and frustration. We know that the visual arts, poetry, being able to write what you feel, gives them a place to be. And so I think what has inspired me and kept me going many years where I didn't make any money and I felt powerless and alone in this work, I've never regretted a day of choosing the arts as a career. And it's because I see the evidence that the arts create social change. It's a powerful tool for social justice, and it works. So I'll turn this over to my colleague.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Right? I'm Linda Caballero Sotelo, and like many of us up here, wear different hats as well. One of them as Executive Director and Chief Curator at New Americans Museum and Immigration Learning Center, where we really strive to be inclusive about our authentic stories multi-generationally. In addition, I'm a commissioner for San Diego Public Library System, a place that has been so incredible for our communities. So many resources, a safe space for our kids, and I think that there's so much more that we can do with our libraries for our communities, and I hope you're all involved in visiting our libraries. I can echo so many of the things that Felicia has said about the transformative power of arts and culture, but when I think about the things that have motivated me and have really impassioned me to the work that I do, it has to be my intolerance for inequality, my intolerance for injustice. And those drivers in my life, whether they have been part of my lived experience or things that I have witnessed or things that I have experienced in my surroundings, have really informed my worldview about the work that I've done throughout my career in different sectors, but always in a creative space in some way, both in corporate, but also in nonprofit for many years, and in projects that involve the voice, again, of the voiceless. I want to say something about our museum, which when we think about a museum, we tend to have a very specific idea of what those spaces are like. Not always welcoming for everyone, exclusive, rarefied. We don't see a lot of people of color either working at executive levels, on boards, in important roles that our kids can see reflect themselves there. Our museum is so different, like many of the other ones, like the Women's Museum and others, that are really focused and digging deeper into how we can serve and how we can reflect the diversity and the authenticity of our voices. And so our work transcends arts and culture from the standpoint of looking at such of the societal issues that we're dealing with. We live in such a charged area, the binational cross-border region. We are the recipient of many lives here, many that come from all over the world, refugee, asylees, people that move here from other places, people that move out of here to go to other places, kids in new schools. I say that by way of sharing that every time we penetrate a new space, we're a newcomer, we're a new person, we're that new kid first day at school, or that person starting a new job, and nobody puts out the welcome mat, right? You got to figure it out. And so my work and our work collectively is really about opening doors, about welcoming the neighbor, as my hero, my mother, would do with what you would imagine were very little resources. She always had a little bit extra for someone else. She always welcomed people, and she always taught me that it's not what you say, it's what you do, right? And so the arts and culture for us are that vehicle that are often undermined in some cases, is not necessarily contributing to the economy, or not seen as a place or spaces that really are part of social change. And you know in your hearts and in your minds that it transforms lives, with some of the examples that Felicia shared, and many that I'm sure all of you can share. So I'm really, really honored to be part of this panel and to share with you the things that I've seen throughout my career, which is long as well, in different circles and environments. And you know what? Sometimes they say, it's the same circus, different clowns. So the lack of access and opportunity not only exists in our spaces, and the representation, but it happens in your spaces and others as well. So for me, it's about really penetrating that and breaking down those barriers and being truthful, and not just performative in our work. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi everyone. First of all, I want to say I'm so honored to be here with the amazing leaders and what they call it, powerful women in the arts and industry and nonprofit. You know, so a big hand to the women. Yeah. So I'm Benito Bautista. I'm independent writer, director, producer. I'm the executive director of the San Diego Filipino Cinema, presenter of the San Diego Filipino Film Festival. And so what motivates me in the work that I do is that early on when I was studying and working in the American film industry, I realized that there's not a lot of us in the film industry. And so when I started creating my own films, I realized, wow, the amazing impact of stories in film can be transformational, not only in the community where you show it, but also globally, if it's expressed globally. And so fortunately enough, we were able, Emma and I, as a programming director and co-founder of San Diego Filipino Cinema, we were fortunate enough to travel because of the films we made, and we realized that we can actually now present our global stories, Filipino stories, in film here in San Diego. And so that's why we created the San Diego Filipino Film Festival. Every time I travel, I'm motivated by the stories that I absorb and the experiences from diverse cultures. And so that is part of my motivation in the work that I do as well. And beautiful women, powerful women, and guiding me on what to do and in the arts and industry and also community. So hello everyone.
My name is Joy Yvonne Jones. I am the president of the San Diego Black Artists Collective and associate artistic director at New Village Arts Theater. What inspires me to do the work? Because it wasn't being done. And I got tired of waiting for someone else to do it. And so as an artist and as a human being, I decided to speak up and listen to the community and what they wanted. Specifically, Black artists in San Diego wanted their own art organization to uplift and support the Black work. And also, working at New Village Arts, being that person to be that's an advocate for artists who come in and don't feel like they have a voice to speak up against things that are happening, or just feel like, just to be a person that they can come to and feel safe with. And I enjoy putting myself in that place because I know that there wasn't a person for me oftentimes in theaters. And I had to accept that I either be abused or never work again with those people. And that was not right. And so I like to stand in the gap now. And I think it's important to do that. And so the San Diego Black Artists Collective is a resource for local Black artists. And we support local Black work. And we're also advocates for people who are working in predominantly white spaces. Right now. For folks working in predominantly white spaces. And yeah, I just want to be of service in the best way that I can, and this is how I have done it. The organization started in 2020. I do not have a long career I haven't been doing this for long. I was pregnant with my first child, and in the hospital, talking to large theaters, explaining to them what they need to do to move forward. And I have continued to do that work, and now that we have over 200 members, there are other people doing that work as well. And we're promoting a lot of art that wouldn't have been seen and bringing it to organizations who wouldn't have known those artists otherwise. So,
thank you. So we're going to get into the questions here, but I mean, if you needed any extra proof that women are goddesses, right here, right? I mean, the things that we do, and you know, whether you decide to be a mother or no in your life, I'll tell you that there's something in women that is capable of so much more than you think you're capable of. It's just an incredible thing. It's a spark that we have, regardless whether or not you want to have children. But so I want to get into, 2020 obviously was a transformative year, and the floodgates opened, right, with the public murder of George Floyd, which had not been anything new, really, right? We have this type of, police activity has been happening for years. It just had never been so publicized and us so secluded in our own worlds where it was, everyone saw it. And, I remember the moment, I was sobbing, and my husband is an ER doctor, and he was able to peg the exact moment of the man's death. And he called it out to me, he's like, right there. And I just thought, So since that, of course it moved all of us, and since that, things are starting to change. So let's talk about the things that we have seen that are different from before that moment, June 2020, that we're seeing now, the changes that we're seeing now. And how do we counter those activity without letting it be performative? Because, right, everybody's wanting to check that box of diversity, equity, inclusion, but is it meaningful? Is it lasting, right? Or is it just, we're checking the box, we have our Latino and Black folks and our Asian folks on the, it's done, we did it? Or is it meaningful, and is it educating and transforming their organizations, truly? So whomever is willing to speak on that, please go ahead.
Well, although we know a benchmark moment was the murder of George Floyd, but we also have to talk about the pandemic. And those two things together really marked a moment when we changed. And so let's talk about 3 or 4 years ago, before all of that happened. The world, I think, in the arts community was pretty much the same as it has been for the last 40 years. The major institutions were still getting the majority of the funds. Artists were marginalized. We didn't have physical spaces to be in, shoved to the corners, and really, really working too hard to be noticed and get our fair share of the pie. So what happened with COVID is it not only shut us in, but it also flooded our economy with money. So we had money coming from the government to save us all, and some of that money trickled out into institutions that had not been included before. And we see the vestige of those funds today. For some individual artists, it was a boom because artists were tapped as some, not the first responders, but the second responders, the people who came and encouraged the community to realize their creativity, to speak up, to demonstrate what they needed. For some people, being shut in was a revelation. So what I'll say about what's changed is that where everything before George Floyd and before COVID was all focused on nonprofit institutions, now we see a shift to individual artists. And the reason we see the shift to individual artists is because individual artists are more flexible, they're mobile, they can get They can get out, they can get where they need to be. They don't need a 501c3. They can really respond to the community's needs very easily, and they're doing it. I am impressed, I'm overjoyed, and I'm inspired by what I've seen individual artists do here in San Diego and across the country over the past 3 years. That the amount of creativity has increased exponentially, and we're seeing finally investment. And I want to be able to tell you guys about some funding that's going to be coming to San Diego really soon for individual artists that I think is going to be transformational. But don't let me get away without announcing that before it's over, okay? Yeah. All right.
There is a question about resources available. Yes.
We'll get to that too, I'm sure. Look, we talk about that incident as if it was one incident, as if it was one time, right? We have issues with structural and systemic inequality in our country, with racism, with exclusion. That's kind of the elephant in the room that we just attach to current movements. But the reality is that that has permeated through people's lives, and it has real impact. When we talk about the arts and culture, what I've seen over the last 4 years, yes, of course, COVID has informed in many ways people's kind of relationship with the private and the public experience, you know, creating new communities even within their own homes, which is really interesting, uncovering and discovering things that we weren't doing as a family or with our friends, that we found creative ways to explore and connect on a human level. But the issues persist. And what I would love to see is substantive change that remains structurally. That's what I hear when I hear performative. Why do I say that? Yes, we've seen shifts on the funding and opportunities for sure. On a national level and a global level, foundations have made commitments. They have made statements that talk about social justice that have impact all across because they invest a lot of money, right? Do we still have access to that money? I can tell you that at least for one ethnic group, but I'm sure the data is not very different for other ethnic groups, for people of color in general. Less than 1% of foundation dollars go to Hispanic or Latino or brown communities from the arts and culture funding. Think about that. Even if it's 1%. And just sit with that for a second. What does that mean? Not just for the organizations that help communities and support them and uplift artists' work. You can't even keep the doors open. You can't pay people. You can't value their work. If I hear of one more artist not getting paid for their work, I'm gonna freaking scream. It really pisses me off. And it pisses me off also. I'm no longer like, oh my God, I'm shocked, that shouldn't happen. Look, yeah, it shouldn't happen, so let's make it not happen, right? Volunteers. Why aren't volunteers getting paid? When you look at our community, and I'm on my soapbox right now about this because I think it impacts you as artists and it impacts all of us. Every time we expect somebody to work for free, they either have the ability to do that as an intern, especially in our rarefied world of arts and culture. So that means that somebody's paying for that, for that young person to be able to get that experience and get in the door. But the majority of our communities of color don't have the ability and the luxury of asking parents who are working 2 jobs, hey, will you cover my gas or my bus pass or my salary while I intern at the New Americans Museum or at the Women's? And we're small fry budget-wise compared to other institutions that definitely have the ability to invest in communities of color, to learn the ropes on the inside so that that curator that looks like you and me and all of us here can turn around and hire artists that look like them as well, and hire other people in that institution, and recruit for board members that look like the rest of us, and that actually reflect the freaking county. Let's look at those demographics in our county, right? The demographics are very clear. Nearly 31% are Hispanic, Mexican-American descent. New, immigrant, and multi-generational. about 14% are Asian American. And I'm going to say one other statistic, which is to me something that we should be talking about every single freaking day. And that's the fact that our African American brothers and sisters made up about 9% of the demographics of this county for many years. Still dismal, but guess what? It's like less than 7% now. It's shrinking. So my question to all of us is, why? Why are we not a welcoming environment, city, culture for people of color? For African Americans, for blacks, why? Why are they leaving? Can't afford it? A lot of us can't afford to live here, but it's more than that, it's systemic. So when we talk about those dollars coming in, let's be real about what's happening with those dollars. I can tell you we got some money as an institution, some. Can we sustain it multi-year? But we're real talk here, right? We're being honest. Because if we're gonna talk about what has changed, we gotta talk about what needs to change still. So I'll leave it with that.
If you have comments about this, I can keep going with more questions or.
I want us to continue to call out organizations who made these statements and are not living up to them. Because once the world opened up, they did their one black show, they did their one Latinx show, they did their one Asian show, and then they're back to business as usual. Or they hired one other artist, or they couldn't find the correct ethnicity for a show, and it's not good enough. Because we're here, we're here, and it's extremely frustrating because now I'm on the administration side of theater to hear that. Because I see artists who are scraping and trying to get by, working several jobs to sustain their art. And this is absurd. And then also with pay. We need to get out of, arts organizations in general, need to get out of the mentality that you're doing an artist a favor by sharing their work. You are not doing us a favor. This is our career, this is our job. So that needs to change. And again, you made all these EDI statements, you want to do better. This is doing better. That is actually valuing the artist and their work is doing better. Much better than what was done before. So that's my soapbox.
Yeah, thank you. Benito, do you have anything to add to that?
Actually, I really appreciate all the remarks that you guys did. I just want to add on just a little bit from our Filipino and Filipino American community. So we came from the first generation Filipino experience, and we are trying to change that using cinema. Okay, so as an art form. So the first generation Filipino immigrant experience is that they come here to the United States thinking that this is a place for opportunities. And so what they did is they did not go to practice their art. What they did is they became nurses and doctors and went to the military, just to make sure that they're economically sustainable, and also practical in their life, And so they passed on that idea to the second generation and to the third generation. And so when you look at a micro example of a Filipino and a Filipino American family, the moment a discussion about where you're going and what kind of profession you're going or industry you're going into, they don't accept the idea that you want to be an artist, because to them it is a losing battle. Based on their experience, you will not have a voice, you will not have representation, you will not be economically sustainable. So we have based on our discussions with the Filipino and Filipino American community, we have nephrologists in our community that are amazing photographers. Yeah, we have a school teacher that's an amazing writer in cinema. We have educators they're actually award-winning filmmakers. But they are going into, we have nurses that are actually actors in award-winning films. So you can tell that that is something that we're trying to change so that we can contribute to the big picture. And so we hope that, oh, by the way, San Diego Filipino Cinema is proud and honored to be in partnership with the New Americans Museum with Linda. You know, so from the get-go, Linda is really, I've learned a lot from Linda. She guided us. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to change our Filipino-American community's experience and ideas so that they can be involved and engaging in social issues, in activism, in discussions, and not resisting the third and the present generation and the future generation to be artists and to support them. You know, so through discussions in stories in films, you know, from perspectives of global Filipino filmmakers that are coming here and that we're learning from them. So, yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to follow up on this. Fascinating what you just brought up. It's so true. You know, I think people who come from immigrant families, your expectation is you're going to get here and you're going to strive and you're going to make it. You're not going to go be an artist, right? I mean, I don't think that people. Yeah, it's a hobby, right? But so yeah, that nurturing of each other, and I love that you just mentioned this collaboration that you have, you know, between New Americans Museum and Immigration Center with the San Diego Filipino Cinema. It reminds me of a film panel that we hosted once where we had the Latino Film Festival and the Asian and PAC Arts Asian Film Festival folks, and one of the speakers, Beth Acamando, who covers film for KPBS, mentioned how, you know, the Latino community, there's some film that exists in Asian cinema that the Latino community would love, because it's so similar in its style and you know, it just made me think about, like, this is why we're all in this room right now, is how can we find ways to support one another across different industries, not even the same industry, across different industries, for the sake of supporting and elevating BIPOC communities, for the sake of supporting each other and sharing resources, collaborating, sharing your venue with someone in a way that is elevating the people that you seek to serve, right? So I just love that you brought that up. It made me think of it. So we have.
Can I just add one more thing about that? Sometimes we don't appreciate or really leverage all these relationships we have around each other, right? Because we're certainly not experts in every aspect of everything. So one of the things that we've done when we've had exhibitions or works that have a multimedia or have a film component, we have invited both the Latino Film Festival and the Asian Film Festival, their curators, to sit down with each other, which doesn't happen often because everybody's so busy, right? They're curating an entire year's worth of films, but sitting with each other to find common themes that to us are universal themes of humanity. You know, whether it's identity, displacement, connections, family, and for them to select films that from their standpoint, from their expertise level, all of the community could connect to. So that was a really amazing experience when we had both curators, Brian, and we had also from Ethan, select films that they felt would speak to both communities. But the other thing that, going back to the question about kind of the sustainability aspect from the standpoint of some of these things we've seen, what has happened over the 4 years, I really think that we need to ask the hard questions in our own institutions, right? In our own institutions, in the makeup, and are we living our missions? Are they even relevant? And I'm gonna tell you something, it's painful. It's painful, but you know, you gotta go through pain to come out on the other side. Because some of the things that some of us have said we were gonna do or we intended to do 12 years ago, 8 years ago, whenever, honestly, it's not relevant. It's not authentic. Or, you know, we really need to drill down and go, how are we going to do that when none of that looks like us? I can tell you from my institution, I'm the first person of color who led an immigration museum, right? So for us, that was like the first, like, well, let's start with that. So, because then we can, I mean, if it's not from the top down, y'all, it's not going to stick. You know, if it's the boxes we're talking about, when it comes time to select that artist or to give a contract out to a vendor, because we have a lot of people in our community who are vendors who don't get an opportunity to vend in our institutions all the time. We don't even think about it. So we have to intentionalize that. And I think that's what's kind of a key point and a missing point out of those statements that were made during the pandemic and during everything we've seen, the strife in our country. And people like checked off things and had some initiatives. It hasn't necessarily been all throughout the institution, and it hasn't been consistent. So I think if we start with ourselves and say, man, we need to put this through this lens, it's going to be more sustainable long term.
Thank you, thank you. I want to follow up with let's get in. It's tagging on that question is, what can we do to keep the door propped open for the next generation as we're talking about institutional change, right? So, you know, to check off these boxes, many institutions are now hiring people of color and giving them, you know, C-level positions or close to C-level positions. Although it's still minimal, by the way, it's only 14% BIPOC in C-level executive leadership positions across the arts. And so what can we do now that we've been given these moments or created opportunities for ourselves, right? Like you didn't see stories like that, so you created your own organization to share those stories. What can we do to keep the doors propped open for the next generation? How do we do that?
So I have to tell you guys a funny story. There are so few African American people, let alone women, at the head of some of our major cultural institutions. There's been times when I was confused with every other black woman there is. So we have a running joke that we're all Felicia. I am Felicia. Because people would confuse me with a woman who was 6 feet tall, maybe 30 pounds, 30 years younger than me, and every difference that you could think of, but we're all Felicia. And the joke is, it's because there's so few of us, we all must be the same person. I'm tired of that joke. It's time for us to diversify in leadership positions, as well as in the middle manager positions, as well as those who are the vendors. Those contracts are lucrative. Becoming the graphic designer for graphic design firm for the Mingay, or being the PR agent for the Museum of Art, that's money, that's business. Doing the catering for some of these really big galas, big contracts. So I want to see us propping open the doors, not just for who's going to be the next ED or who's going to be the next curator, but who has the janitorial contract at the Museum of Contemporary Art. That's pretty lucrative. It's doing business with these institutions and being part of the organizations that are making the cultural choices. The thing I want to say about how we create lasting change is not just by being in these institutions, but by keeping place, by making physical, geographic place. Real estate is everything. And so what I'm excited about is seeing things like the Barrio Logan, cultural district popping up, where you're making place for things to happen and you're defining what happens in those physical places for your people that is about your people. We have a new Black Arts district in Encanto that's popping up. Placekeeping, making sure that you're not forgotten, that this land that you stand on is yours and you can define what happens there. I'm interested in seeing more institutions prop up, and I'll use the Women's Museum as an example. We're not an organization of color, it has to be run by a person of color, but we chose to be in Southeast San Diego. We chose to be in a community that was underserved and marginalized. Can we see more institutions branch out and plant themselves in South Bay and other communities that have been neglected in terms of arts and culture? Placekeeping is really, really important for us to reverse the discrimination, I'll put it that way. When we think about Balboa Park, the two organizations of color, the Centro Cultural de la Raza and World Beat, have still been, are the only institutions in a water tank. How could that be? After all these years, they're still on the outskirts of Balboa Park in a water tank. Okay, thriving, they're important, love them, but where's their brick and mortar? Where's their, where's their rope? The velvet rope to go in. It's not happening soon enough, so we're going to have to make it happen for ourselves.
Amen to that. And one more thing to add, being part of a system, it also requires accountability. It's built into the performance levels of the company, of the organization, of the nonprofit. They're going to hold the executive director, the CEO, accountable for that person leaving after 3 months because they didn't feel welcome, right? It's that story that we hear about a young person of color who's never navigated different worlds, and all of a sudden, they go to a university for the first time. And we have a rate that our young people drop out the first year of college, after having a successful high school career. They're never really included or feel like they belong. So that's one thing we can think about and talk about in the spaces we all sit. This person, yeah, they have a different perspective. They're a different ethnicity, different story. We're all different, right? Are we really making them feel included? Did we change policies and procedures so this is systemic throughout this organization? Those are questions that sometimes we confuse the two terms with. And I urge you to dig deeper and think about what that means.
I want to comment on, I was mistaken as someone, I was Felicia, someone who is 5 feet tall and very different from myself, literally this week. How? I am a giant. How? And same with going to college. I went to the University of Minnesota. I'm from Texas. When I tell you, shock of my life, being in Minneapolis for 4 years, but I refused to let them kick me out. But going back to the original question, it's how do we include the next generation? Keep your foot on their necks and the door open. Include the next generation now. Any opportunity where you see someone that's younger can come in and do social media or be a paid intern, bring them in. And that's how you engage the next generation right now. Because this whole waiting for them to get mature or whatever and earn the spot, no. Because it doesn't happen for us. Those opportunities often are given to nepotism babies. So when we get to these organizations and we see young folks that are hungry and ready to do the work, find something for them to do right now. Create programs and provide them the education that they may not be able to afford. It is a privilege to go to an arts university and get $1,000 of debt, maybe, just to do the thing that you love. Some people cannot afford that. I know I grew up in a single parent household. I am in lots of debt from going to a conservatory, but I am still privileged to have been able to do so. And so when we see folks who are earnestly trying to do the thing that they are meant to do, let's create space. And again, these institutions who have made these statements say, hey, there's a young person right here who can help you fulfill this thing that you promised. Give them a chance. Yeah, that's right.
I want to talk about inclusion. So I think when we are in the position of management, in whatever, in the arts and nonprofit, I think we should pay attention about inclusivity. And so my wife and I, she's a film producer, and so she's my co-producing partner in producing films. And so we make it a point to make sure that we are inclusive in the film production. We have women, we have LGBTQ, we have BIPOC communities that are represented in the making of a film. And so when we also mentor young filmmakers, and so we teach them, we encourage them to do the same. so that we can learn from each other, So inclusion, especially if you are in a level where you can actually not mandate, but you have the opportunity to really make a change, then I think you have to show it, so that they can see it, So when we present a film that we are diverse, that we are all inclusive in the making of films and whatever art form. And so the other one that I want to discuss is I've been to, as a young nonprofit organization, San Diego Filipino Cinema, I've been to conferences and workshops that are supposedly giving out money to nonprofit organizations for their year-round programming. And these are like what they call excess revenue coming from different districts by the supervisors. And so I look at the funding, I look at the excess revenues, right? And there's a lot of money there, right? And so you sit down in these workshops, and the number one requirement to access those funds is that you have to do your program, you have to present it, right? And then you get reimbursed, right? So that just doesn't make sense, because there's a lot of nonprofit, that are beginning, and they're doing amazing events, and and giving it to the public for free, but they are going to borrow money from somebody, or you know what I'm saying, and then get reimbursed a year later. Okay, so and so that during one of the conferences we asked that question. Can we change this? This is old school. This is this is backwards. This is and they said this has been the guidelines for giving funds and accessing funds, and just that will not work. That will kill young nonprofit organizations that are trying to do something amazing. And
wow, he opened up a can of worms here with that one.
I mean, anytime that someone says we've always done it this way, which is the exact reason to not do it that way anymore. So we're a little bit pressed for time, so I want to ask a sort of twofold question. One is, if you have them, if you can share them, what resources are available for the BIPOC community out there? And the follow-up question to that is, what piece of advice would you give your young self? How would you have done it differently, if at all?
Yes. Well, I'm really excited to share with you one resource is coming up. So, the state of California we're doing pretty well. We have a surplus, and the way the governor decided to spend some of the surplus is on arts and culture. $60 million for individual artists. This is really cool. And so the idea, you remember the WPA, during the Depression, and they invested a lot of money in creatives? Well, this program is called the California Creative Corps. And the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition is going to be working on behalf of the Arts Commission to distribute about $5 million in grants to individual artists. But what makes it so cool is not just $1,000, because that's usually how the money is given out. You have just enough to do nothing. But we'll be distributing about 115 grants in the amount of $25,000 so that artists can do, I wish it was unrestricted so you could do whatever you want, but actually you'll be working in the social justice arena, helping to share information and messages about certain issues. It might be civic engagement, or it might be the environment, or it might be homelessness, or any of those things, using your skill set your unique skill set, whether you can dance it out or sing it out or, do a mural. And can you imagine what that would look like? $25,000, you have a whole year plus almost an extra $10,000 to cover your administrative costs. So here's what I know about artists. Artists hire artists, right? Yeah. So you get the money, and then you can finally pay that other artist who you typically ask to do something for free for you. You can ask them, hey, would you come and set this music to this choreography? Or hey, would you come and do this thing that I'm not really good with? Could you put some sound to this? We are so thrilled to have this opportunity to spread some of this wealth, and I believe that there's more to come. If we can demonstrate to the governor that we can move the needle on some of our most pressing issues here in San Diego and across the state, I'm hoping, talk about sustainability, that money will continue and that it won't be just a flash in the pan. I'll take the flash in the pan. Okay, we won't cut that off, but can we keep it coming for years to come? So I have my business card with me, and if any of you think that you work in that type of world where your work can be a beacon or a tool for social change, this might be exactly what you're looking for. So I look forward to talking to you.
That's so exciting. Oh my God.
What piece of advice would you give your young self?
Oh, well, I took my own advice. I actually always stayed engaged in the community. I volunteered and I interned a lot. I just tried things. I was very privileged to be able to try things, and I get that not everybody could. But I had 3 kids, and I was an intern. I did it. I went to intern at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and I was a grown-ass woman. You know what I mean? So, but I did it because I felt like I still needed to learn, and that internship turned into a whole different career for me. So you're never you can be Robert De Niro, an intern, you can still do it, so do it.
But they should pay you. Especially if you have 3 kids, and especially the budget they have. Gosh, I'm gonna start from the end and then I'll go back. Yeah. The research you just shared is spectacular. I've never seen anything like that at that capacity and that breadth to take advantage of it. Why do I think it's such a great, great opportunity? Because you can leverage that for additional funding. If you can say, this organization, regional organization, invested in me to be able to develop new work or whatever it is you're gonna do, and you go after additional funding for other projects that you only dreamed of or you only imagined, then you can use this as leverage. They invested for me here, now I need an additional. Look what I did with $25,000. Imagine if I had $150,000, X Foundation, Warhol, whatever, you can get it. And then I'm sure you have other resources, Felicia, for fiscal sponsorships and all those things. I wanted to offer this up. Sometimes we don't even know the resources that we have ourselves. But whatever they are, whether it's space with the museum with us, whether it's connections, introductions, please look our way. Come see me, call me, contact me. We have several spaces in Liberty Station, but we also work in different communities and we use their spaces in other communities. City Heights, Logan Heights, Linda Vista, whether it's libraries or other community-based organizations where we actually pay them to use their space. Think of other places where you could do some work, pop up, experiment, try new things. Sometimes when an organization or an institution gets a call from a sister organization or another institution, they tend to pick up the phone faster because they think, what am I going to get out of it, right? Unfortunately, they won't necessarily get back to an artist quick enough, right? So use these friends you have here, your resources, and help us, make those calls for you. Help us help you as well. You offer up the spaces and whatnot. I wanted to mention 2 organizations very quickly that actually fund artists. One of them, there's many that do it, but one of them is We Staff. It's the Western Association, it's in West Staff. I'm hearing we everywhere. We. West Ave. They have artist pools of funds as well, and they'll look favorably to those that have funding from another organization at the local level that has statewide funding. The other one is NALAC, based out of Texas. They have specific designated artists and emerging artists, not just established artists, funds to develop. And the last thing I wanted to mention on that front, what's that? Which one? NALAC, it's N-A-L-A-C, NALAC, National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, okay? WESTAF, W-E-S-T-A-F. It's an acronym for Western State something or other, but it's, yeah, some. The other thing I wanted to urge you to think about with the funding and all these other resources is don't be shy about going for residency programs. Go after residency programs. And the reason I'm going to say that is because there's some really prominent national and international ones that you should apply for. Because guess what, as artists, you need time to think. And to think without stressing about if you can pay your rent or your studio space while you're doing this. These kind of residencies, you can do them, some are a couple of weeks, some are a couple of months, some are an entire year. These paid residencies not only pay you, but they pay for your travel, your time to develop, to just sit down and think. Think. When do you have time to think? That's when real, I think, change begins to happen. So there's many that I know of off the top. I don't want to start mentioning some that may not apply, but happy to connect with you another time about that as well. And advice I would give to myself, gosh, man, my own self, earlier in my career, how young? Starting off. Be even more fearless. Be even more fearless. We hold ourselves back a lot. We want to fit in. We want to do all these things that your authentic self is enough.
I was listening and I forgot that I had to speak. Resources. The BIPOC Support Foundation is always looking for organizations and individuals to give to. And yeah, that's my best resource. Also, the San Diego Black Artists Collective has a newsletter that goes out every month that has auditions, and I'm writing down the things that y'all say so that it can go in our newsletter. And yeah, the advice I would give my younger self, I mean, I'm still pretty young, so, is that I can do everything. Don't limit myself, not to limit myself. Again, being in predominantly white spaces, I shrank a lot, and so now I'm in the process of growing and expanding to the person that I was always meant to be. So continue to grow and not to limit myself. Yeah.
Yes, resources. If you are interested in telling stories or in documentary format, go to Color Congress. It's sponsored by Sundance. So in any format, it's a 3-minute, 4-minute, 10-minute documentary film format. Yeah.
What was it called again?
Color Congress.
Okay.
Yes.
And I want to plug something for Benito. He does with his team, an incredible workshop for emerging storytellers. I'm not even going to say filmmakers because everybody is like, oh my God, I'm not a filmmaker. But you're a storyteller. He has an incredible workshop that they do, several sessions, and it culminates in a piece. Spectacular approach that they use, very inclusive and really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Benito, what piece of advice would you give your young self?
Continue to grow, continue to evolve. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you. I want to share. Every single one of you here. I'm so impressed by you. I'm really moved by the conversation that happened today, and I want to thank you all for sticking around and being a part of this conversation. Not everyone here is BIPOC, but you're clearly allies, and I'm so grateful for you. Give a big shout out to all of the panelists here today, and definitely give a big shout out to all the participants who helped to make this possible. We have Be Creative Zone right over there, Christy Stone. And if you have not contributed to that project, please just touch it in some way. Leave your spirit here today, add a sticker or draw a flower on it or something. And then Simone, if you can raise your hand wherever you are, please make sure you tell her. This is a documentary that we're putting together. We're asking you, what is the most inspiring creative city that you can imagine have to have? So just even if you just touch it and go answer that question for her so that she can capture that moment, it will be spliced into a time capsule of what San Diego's creative community wants for the future of their sector. Also, a big shout out to Cacique over here who stuck around with us today to help us with the audio. And all of our volunteers, all of our Vanguardistas who are here tonight, and a big much love to the Soap Factory for hosting us today. We're so grateful to you guys. Big round of applause for Benito Bautista, Troy Yvonne Jones, Linda Caballero Sotelo, and Felicia Shaw. Thank you all so much.